Chapter 634. Jiyun gazed at the resplendent sunlight rising in the direction of the immeasurable mountain. He could feel the soft hum coming from the cloud heaven sword in his hand. He had never felt so close to the true pinnacle of swordsmanship. What kind of sword was that? Majestic, mighty, blazing. It was like the sun shining and sprinkling down brilliant heavenly might. The Sword Emperor of the Boundless Sword sect, Zhou Xian, could already be considered the supreme expert of the sword Tao in this world. He had once fought the Vision Saint Stage expert alone with his sword, forcing that Vision Saint Stage expert to be unable to do anything to him during the Vision Saint Stage and finally retreat. It had to be known that the prominent Sage Stage was considered the strongest existence in any territory or country. Relying on the might of a prominent Sage Stage expert, they could easily establish a vast country, command hundreds of millions of people, become the supreme emperor, and enjoy wealth and glory. As long as they didn't offend the peak existences of the six supreme sects, the prominent Sage Stage expert was practically unrivaled in the vast and boundless fortune continent. But now, the Sword Emperor Zhou Xian, who was strong enough to fight against a prominent Sage Stage expert, couldn't even withstand a single sword strike from this mysterious expert that he had never seen before. To any sword Tao cultivator who had always lived in an environment where the sword Tao was inferior to the divine beast cultivation system, this was tantamount to sprinkling a ray of light in the midst of despair. Jiyun, who was obsessed with the sword and had even dedicated his life to the sword, seemed to have truly seen the true essence of the sword Tao. For a moment, he couldn't care about anything else and flew over at his fastest speed, shouting for Senior to wait. Then, like a devout believer, he knelt down respectfully to Tsing Hui and kowtowed. His forehead heavily smashed on the ground, as if he was worshipping a god. I, Jiyun, wish to learn the sword from Senior. Please teach me. Oh. Looking at Jiyun, who was bowing to him piously, Tsing Hui was a little moved. Initially, he had only looked for Jiyun because of his obsession with the sword Tao. When he really saw this person, he had some other thoughts. Now, looking at Yun kneeling and kowtowing to him, as well as the joy in her eyes that seemed to have survived a desperate situation, he couldn't help but think of himself back then. Back then, he had devoted himself to the cultivation of sword Tao because of his passion for it. However, under the pressure of the outside world, he had to give up his beloved sword Tao and choose the cultivation system of the divine beast lineage in order to adapt to this world better. He wanted to quickly return to Earth and reunite with his family and friends. He wanted to fulfill his promise to Senior Sister Ningxi, so he had to give up his beloved sword Tao and choose the cultivation system of the divine beast lineage. He still remembered the struggle and despair he had felt when he figured out that he could only choose one between the divine beast cultivation system and the sword cultivation system. And the Jiyun in front of him, he might not have reached the same level as he did back then, but he had more or less sensed something. There was no path ahead. His sword Tao was severed. For a cultivator who was obsessed with the sword Tao, this was enough torture to drive him crazy. Under such circumstances, Tsing Hui's sudden appearance seemed to have opened a new chapter in the sword Tao cultivation system. How could he not be overjoyed? How could he not sacrifice everything? While Tsing Hui was sizing up Jiyun, the supreme expert of the infinite sword sect, Sword Emperor Zhou Xian, also realized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He followed closely behind Jiyun and bowed respectfully to Tsing Hui. I am Zhou Guang. I am also willing to learn the sword from Senior. Please accept me as your disciple. From now on, I will be at your beck and call. Tsing Hui glanced at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian was also a stunning genius. If he was willing to focus on the divine beast cultivation system, he would have at least reached the prominent sage stage, or even the sage stage. He could give up his bright future to be engrossed in the sword. It was obvious that he was also a cultivator who was obsessed with the sword Tao. It was just that he could not be compared to Jiyun. Just as Tsing Hui was about to say something, a group of dozens of people rode on a flying Dharma artifact that looked like a miniature warship and quickly headed in this direction. Soon, they arrived above the outer square of the infinite sword sect. This group of a few dozen people was obviously led by 6 young people, and the cultivation of these 6 young people ranged from the green nether realm to the prominent divine realm. Based on their age, they could be said to be overflowing with talent. Behind them, there were a few old men with profound auras, and the old man with the highest status even had his aura concealed. Obviously, he had reached the transformative realm where he could freely control his aura. And looking at their clothes, they were all members of the primordial sect of the 6 supreme sections. Am I late? Didn't they say that 2 of the world's top sword Dao experts were going to have a life and death duel here? According to the rumors, it should be noon. There's still an hour before noon, so we should be able to make it. Why are all of you kneeling on the ground now? What's going on? The only young man in the prominent sage stage looked down in surprise. His gaze was constantly sizing up Zhou Xian, Jiyun, and Xinghui. Young master. In fact, the one who is bowing is the sect master of the infinite sword sect, Zhou Xian, who is known as the Sword Emperor. The remaining one kneeling on the ground is this time's challenger, a young man overflowing with talent. It is said that he is only in the spirit refining realm, but he has already made a name for himself and is known as the next successor of the Sword Saint. The transcendent stage elder with the highest cultivation level who came with a few young people looked at them and introduced with a smile. Before the young man spoke, a black-robed man who was younger than him sneered. Sword Emperor? What a big mouth. You're only in the blue underworld realm, yet you dare to call yourself the Sword Emperor. Are you not afraid of being ridiculed if this spreads out? A woman in a yellow dress beside him said impatiently, "What's there to see about a group of people who play with swords and sabers? If I remember correctly, these people are all very weak." Back then, senior brother Nintendo was somewhat curious about these so-called sword emperors, sword saints, and sword saints. So he invited the 6 most famous sword Dao experts to gather at the star-gathering peak, hoping to experience their sword skills. In the end, these 6 so-called sword emperors, sword masters, and sword saints attacked senior brother Nintendo for 6 hours, but they didn't even touch the corner of senior brother Nintendo's clothes. Instead, they were all panting from exhaustion. In the end, senior brother Nintendo defeated all 6 of them with just a light palm. Speaking to here, the yellow-dressed girl added, "At that time, senior brother was only in the blue underworld realm, not even in the vision divine realm, not to mention now, entering the transformative realm." Junior martial sister Huang Ying is right. Senior brother Nintendo was already able to disregard these so-called sword emperors, sword saints, and sword masters when he was in the blue underworld realm. Senior brother Nan Tianxiang, it is said that your talent is even higher than senior brother Nintendo. These people's so-called sword skills and sword Dao are even more meaningless to you. There's no harm in watching. That Jiyun is known as the future sword saint. He actually defeated a blue underworld realm cultivator in the spirit refining realm. I'm very curious and want to see what methods he used. The only vision divine realm youth, Nan Tianxiang, said with a smile. Then quickly finish watching and go back. After the yellow-dressed girl, Huang Ying, finished speaking, she turned her gaze to Jiyun and Zhou Xian below. "Hey, the 2 of you, immediately take out your strongest sword techniques and let my senior brother Tian Xiang take a good look. If your performance is exciting, we might be happy and give you a technique to condense a sacred body and let you step into the vision sage realm. A method to condense a saint body." Zhou Xian's heart trembled. The Fortune Mainland's 6 supreme sects had a strong monopoly over cultivation methods. Unless a Fortune Mainland cultivator joined one of the 6 supreme sects or became a part of one of the 6 supreme sects forces, it was very difficult to obtain any high-grade cultivation methods. Moreover, due to the Fortune Mainland's great distance from the Heaven Wasteland domain, very few people would come to the Fortune Mainland to trade. This made the Fortune Mainland's monopoly even stronger than in the Heaven Wasteland domain. Xinghui had thought that Zhou Xian was unwilling to break through to the Vision Divine realm because he was obsessed with the Sword Dao, but he was wrong. He had entered the Purple Firmament Palace the moment he arrived at the Fortune Mainland and didn't know how precious the cultivation method was. Zhou Xian's spiritual force had been tempered to the extent that it wasn't inferior to a true element realm cultivator. But because he didn't have a method to condense a saint body, he had been stuck in the blue underworld realm. Now that he could obtain a method to condense a saint body, he looked at the mysterious senior Tai Ching who had ignored him, and his determination wavered. Sword Dao. No matter how strong the Sword Dao was, there was a limit to it. Just like this senior Tai Ching in front of him. Although his sword was blazing like the sun and unstoppable, it was probably only at the level of a true element realm cultivator's attack. As for a true element realm cultivator, he could be considered a peak figure in the outside world, but in the six supreme sects, he was nothing. Thinking of this, Zhou Xian stood up and hurriedly said, "Thank you, geniuses of the grand beginning sect. I will fight with Zhi Yun now. Please watch." With that, he hurriedly turned to Zhi Yun and urged, "Zhi Yun, you should have heard what the grand beginning sect's geniuses said. Let's compete now and satisfy the grand beginning sect's geniuses. At that time, we will be able to have the next cultivation method." However, Zhi Yun didn't even look at Zhou Xian. Her gaze was fixed on Xing Hui as she waited for his answer. "Zhi Yun, are you willing to give up such a good opportunity?" Zhou Xian was anxious. "Hey, what are you doing? Why haven't you started? Are you wasting my time?" At this moment, Huang Ying, who was standing on a flying Dharma artifact in the void, urged unhappily, "Right away, right away. I will compete with Zhi Yun right away." As Zhou Xian spoke, he had no choice but to turn his gaze to Xing Hui. "Senior Tai Ching, regardless of whether you want to take Zhi Yun as your disciple or not, how about letting me compete with him?" Xing Hui glanced at Zhou Xian. He admired him just now, but he was acting like this in order to convert to the divine beast cultivation system. His eyes couldn't help but turn cold. "Are you guys fighting or not?" On the flying Dharma artifact, Huang Ying's patience was clearly getting worse. From the looks of it, it seems like this future sword saint, Zhi Yun, wants to acknowledge this person called Tai Ching as his master. And I remember that Zhou Xian was also bowing to him just now, right? Could it be that this person called Tai Ching is more powerful than Zhi Yun and Zhou Xian? At this moment, Nantian Xiang smiled playfully. If you want to watch a battle between experts, you naturally have to watch a battle between top experts. Tai Ching, fight with Zhou Xian. Show us your so-called sword Dao, sword techniques, and so on. Let's take a good look. Just as my junior sister Huang Ying said, if the battle is exciting and makes us happy, we will naturally reward you. The sixth desire spirit cultivation technique is about to be mastered. The sword momentum is just around the corner. Chapter 635. Yes, 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 please rest assured. We'll definitely show you everything we've learned. Zhou Xian bowed towards Huang Ying, Nantian Xiang, and so on. At the same time, he turned towards the green ruins of the Grand Pure One again and pleaded softly, "Senior Grand Pure One, please cooperate with me and fight with me. This time, let's not use our full strength right from the start. Let's use our best moves step by step until the last moment before erupting with our strongest attack to determine the winner. I, Zhou Xian, will be eternally grateful after this. You're known as the Sword Emperor, one of the great masters of the Sword Dao on Fortune Mainland. Now that you have the opportunity to cultivate the divine beast lineage, you're giving up your own Sword Dao without hesitation? Is this your attitude towards the Sword Dao?" Xing Hui turned around and looked at Zhou Xian. The disappointment on his face was even more obvious. "Senior Taishang, stop fooling around. Sword Dao, I can't deny that when I was young, I did travel thousands of mountains and rivers in search of famous masters and sword masters in pursuit of the Sword Dao. But in the end, currently, I am already standing at the pinnacle of the Sword Dao. Even the sword saints and sword masters of the other sword Dao holy grounds are at the same level as me. However, this so-called pinnacle of the Sword Dao is so weak in front of those prominent divine stage and true energy stage experts. Back then, I had indeed fought to a draw with a prominent divine stage expert. However, Only I understand the feeling of it. If the prominent divine stage and true energy stage are already like this, then there's no need to mention the transformative stage, endless stage, and those peak experts who have cultivated their Naiden. Zhou Xian's expression was a little gloomy and pained when he said this, but soon this expression was replaced by determination. There's no future in the Sword Tao. I can't see a future when cultivating the Sword Tao. Pursuing the highest, the strongest, and longevity is the instinct of any cultivator. I can't give up longevity for a Sword Tao that has no future at all. Therefore, since there's a chance to climb to a higher realm, I won't hesitate even if I have to give up the Sword Tao that has accompanied me for more than 200 years. Xinghui glanced at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian might be similar to him, and perhaps he had his own reasons for not switching to the divine beast lineage, but, however, his performance this time disappointed Qing Su very much. This was a swordsman who had completely lost his sharpness. Even if he saw a new future and a new peak in the Sword Tao, he was destined to be unable to go far on the path of the Sword Tao. Are you done yet? You're blabbering on and on. Did you hear me when I told you to beat me up? My time isn't time. Do you believe that if I'm unhappy, I'll directly order people to raise your so-called boundless sword sect to the ground? At this time, the yellow aureole on the flying magic tool lost its patience and shouted loudly. Zhou Xian was instantly frightened to the point of trembling when he heard Huang Ying's threat. He could no longer be bothered to waste his breath on Tsing Hui and shouted loudly, "We'll attack right now." Then he turned to Tsing Hui and shouted in a low voice, "Senior Grand Pure One, please, please." However, Grand Pure One Tsing Hui did not even look at Zhou Xian. Instead, he turned his gaze to Hunyuan, who was still kneeling on the ground with a determined expression. "Since you want to acknowledge me as your master and learn the sword from me, then look carefully. Today, I will let you understand that when the Sword Tao reaches its peak, it can still compete with the Divine Beast lineage cultivation system. It can even be stronger than the Divine Beast lineage cultivation system." As soon as he finished speaking, his gaze turned to the people of the Grand Beginning sect who were standing on the flying magic tool and looking down from above as if they were waiting to watch a clown show. Then, he raised his sword and unsheathed it. Grand Pure One Tsing Hui did not use the Scarlet Abyss sword, and his own strength was slightly inferior to Tsing Hui's original body. However, Tsing Hui's original body was already strong enough to kill a divine being. Although Grand Pure One Tsing Hui was slightly inferior to Tsing Hui's original body and did not use the Scarlet Abyss divine sword, his full strength was still comparable to a Golden Core sovereign. As he brandished his sword, the brilliant sword light was like a rising sun that had jumped out of the horizon. The majestic sword intent that illuminated the soul swept out in a mighty manner, causing the expressions of everyone on the flying artifact to change drastically. It was as if they had fallen into a sea of fire under the scorching sun. "How dare you?" Seeing that Grand Pure One Tsing Hui dared to attack the experts of the Grand Beginning sect, the leader of the younger generation, Nantian Xiang, flew into a rage. With a fierce roar, he had already soared into the air. A vast and imposing shadow appeared behind him. It was a Kuan Peng that dominated the world and swallowed mountains and rivers. Kuan Peng. Kuan Peng Divine Physique. That's senior brother Tian Xiang's Kuan Peng Divine Physique. In the past, senior brother Nantian Do did not condense a divine grade battle physique. With the power of the Kuan Peng Divine Physique, senior brother Tian Xiang will definitely surpass senior brother Nantian Do and become the new strongest person in our Grand Beginning sect. He might even become the strongest person among the younger generation of the Fortune Mainland's 6 Supreme Sections. The Green Netherworld Realm junior brothers and sisters who came with Nantian Xiang shouted excitedly when they saw the Kuan Peng Divine Physique that Nantian Xiang had summoned. Even the true energy boundary old men behind him looked at the Kuan Peng Divine Physique that Nantian Celestial Phenomenon manifested with envy. With the Kuan Peng Divine Physique, Nantian Xiang was destined to have a bright future. This was also the reason why they did not hesitate to follow Nantian Xiang, even though they were true element boundary experts. This was an investment in their potential. Otherwise, when Nantian Xiang stepped into the true element boundary, the transformative boundary, or even the never-ending boundary, ordinary true element boundary elders like them would not be able to catch Nantian Xiang's eyes. Let me see who gave you the courage to make you lowly sword cultivators attack my grand beginning sect. After summoning the Kuan Peng, the southern celestial phenomenon's aura climbed to the limit. With a deep roar, the Kuan Peng that was so colossal that it seemed like it could devour the world and turn everything into darkness and chaos suddenly flapped its wings. With the power to distort space, it lunged towards the brilliant sword intent that the green ruins had conjured. It was as if the brilliant sword light of the green ruins of the Grand Clear lineage would be torn to shreds with a single swipe. Lowly sword Dao cultivator? Short-sighted. Who gave you the courage to say such words? A hint of anger flashed in the eyes of Tsing Hui, who had been calm all this time. In the next moment, the Kuan Peng divine physique, which was already burning brightly, exploded like the scorching sun at noon, shining with unprecedented brilliance. Under the cover of this brilliance, the Kuan Peng divine physique was like a moth that had been thrown into a flame. Its divine physique was instantly set ablaze. No, it was not set ablaze. Instead, it was shredded into pieces by the brilliant sword chi. From an outsider's perspective, it looked like it had been set ablaze. The destruction of the Kuan Peng divine physique caused Nantian Xiang to roar in shock and anger. What is this? At the same time, the broken Kuan Peng divine physique flew away, tried to escape the range of the brilliant sword chi. However, at this moment, Tsing Hui had already swung his sword again. The brilliant sword chi, which was like a scorching sun, crashed into the broken Kuan Peng divine physique like a falling sun. In an instant, Nantian Xiang's Kuan Peng divine physique was reduced to ashes. Oh no! Quick attack! Nantian Xiang's miserable cry rang out at the same time as the voices of the true energy realm elders who had suddenly returned to their senses. Immediately, powerful constitutions appeared one after another, lunging towards the green ruins of grand purity. Every single one of them used their full strength, and the might they possessed was enough to sweep through the clouds. The tremendous pressure made Zhou, Xian, Hunyuan, and all the cultivators of the infinite sword sect widen their eyes. However, what shocked them even more was the brilliant sword chi that Tsing Hui had unleashed. Faced with the attacks of 4 true energy cultivators and 1 transformative cultivator, the green ruins of grand purity formed a sword seal. The dazzling light that resembled the sun directly split into 5, transforming into 5 strands of sword chi that blazed with divine light. The sword chi whistled through the air, incinerating space and leaving behind ripples that resembled channels in the air. They struck the bodies of the 4 true energy cultivators and 1 transformative cultivator in a single instance before piercing through and incinerating them. Even though the transcendent realm cultivator screamed and tried to use all his strength to resist the sword chi, he was powerless. He could only watch as his battle physique was destroyed by the sword chi. The true energy realm elders screamed at the same time when their battle physiques were destroyed. Some of the prominent Saint Guards were so scared that they did not dare to continue attacking. This is a battle physique. A true energy realm elder's battle physique. A transcendent realm elder's battle physique. Just how powerful is a battle physique? A single strike can be said to be devastating. Even our entire Boundless Sword sect might be wiped out by a single strike from this battle physique. Even half of the Boundless Mountain would be destroyed. But why is such a powerful battle physique so weak before this senior Grand Pure one? Sword Emperor Zhou Xian's heart trembled as he stared at the brilliant sword light that illuminated the world like an eternal sun. Zhiyun, who was still kneeling on the ground, stared at the blazing figure condensed from sword intent and sword chi. Her eyes were filled with fanaticism, as if she was witnessing the descent of a god that she had dedicated herself to. This is the way of a sword. This is the way of the sword that I've pursued my entire life." Ji screamed madly in her heart. Why? You actually dare to do this?" The disciples of the Grand Beginning Sect all paled in fright when they saw the 4 true energy realm elders, including the strongest transcendent realm elder, get their battle physiques destroyed at the same time. One of the braver ones said angrily after recovering from the shock, "How dare you destroy the battle physiques of our Grand Beginning Sect's elders? Do you want to start a war with us? Our primordial sect will never let you off." Grand Beginning Sect? Sing Hui's expression returned to indifference. He glanced at Ji Yun and waved his hand. True energy wrapped around Ji Yun's body and brought him to the flying Dharma artifact where Huang Ying, Nantian Xiang, and the others were. What do you want?" The old man in the transcendent state, who was the most knowledgeable among all of them, endured the pain of his body being destroyed and said with a pale face, "Everyone here is a genius disciple of the Grand Beginning Sect. If you dare hurt them, the Grand Beginning Sect will hunt you down until you're dead. We provoke you first today, so we can pretend that it didn't happen. But if you dare to take a mile after taking an inch, our Grand Beginning Sect will let you understand the foundation of a supreme sect." Sing Hui ignored the transcendent realm elder who threatened him. Instead, he turned to Ji Yun. "Ji Yun, although I have an in-name disciple named Sing Hui, you're the first true disciple. Are you willing to be my disciple?" "I am." Ji Yun knelt down without hesitation and kowtowed respectfully. "Disciple Ji Yun greets master." "Good." Sing Hui nodded indifferently. "Since you are my disciple, I will bring you to experience the tip of the iceberg of the peak of Sword Dao today." With that, he glanced at Nantian Xiang, who was still screaming in pain, and the pale-faced transcendent realm elder. "I will give you a chance to avenge your humiliation. Go to the Grand Beginning Sect. The first true disciple has appeared. Please recommend and support me." Chapter 636. Go to the Grand Beginning Sect. The old man, who was worried that Sing Hui would kill them all and threaten their safety, was stunned for a moment. Then, he seemed to realize something and stared at Sing Hui in disbelief. "You want to use your so-called Sword Dao to challenge our Grand Beginning Sect? Activate your flying artifacts," Sing Hui said indifferently. The 3 pure ones could create 2 avatars, but these 2 avatars' personalities weren't exactly the same as the main body. For example, the Grand Pure One's personality was indifferent, but the Prime Pure One's personality was cold and fierce. However, because it was mainly influenced by Sing Hui's main body, it wasn't too obvious. "Okay, I'll activate the flying artifacts and head to the Grand Beginning Sect." The transcendent old man didn't hesitate to give the order when he saw Sing Hui's words. Immediately, ordinary prominent stage elders took charge of controlling the flying artifacts and flew towards the Grand Beginning Sect at full speed. On the flying artifacts, the fear in the eyes of Huang Ying and the other disciples of the Grand Beginning Sect gradually dissipated. They looked at Sing Hui and Ji Yun with a trace of mockery and resentment. He doesn't know the difference between life and death. He really doesn't know the difference between life and death. What is he trying to do? Does he really think that his so-called Sword Dao is a match for our Grand Beginning Sect's experts? Just you wait. When he arrives at our Grand Beginning Sect, I'll definitely ask my master to personally capture and kill him. Then, I'll ruthlessly torture him and make him understand the price of offending our Grand Beginning Sect. Huang Ying's eyes were filled with resentment. The other disciples of the Grand Beginning Sect had similar thoughts as Huang Ying. All of them were filled with hatred. This bastard popped out of nowhere and thinks he's invincible just because he defeated 2 of our Grand Beginning Sect's elders? He's overestimating himself by challenging our Grand Beginning Sect. Soon, he'll pay the price for his arrogance. It seems like because of the existence of that person in the Central Plains, our Grand Beginning Sect hasn't been spreading our teachings on the Fortune mainland, causing the world to forget about our Grand Beginning Sect strength. Do they think that our Grand Beginning Sect is made of clay? After all, even that existence in the Central Plains who dared to call himself the Lord of Creation did so, because our grand beginning sect wasn't willing to fight him to the point both sides suffered heavy losses. If our grand beginning sect really did utilize all our reserves, then only death would await him. Soon, he will understand what it means to regret it. With all sorts of resentment in their hearts, they quickly flew in the direction of the primeval sect. Flying artifacts were different from warships. While they pursued comfort, they also ensured speed. Therefore, the cost of production was often higher. In terms of size, this large flying artifact was comparable to a small warship. Its interior was quite spacious. In addition, its flying speed wasn't inferior to that of a blue netherworld realm expert at full speed. Sing Hui estimated that its price was comparable to a 7th or even 8th grade divine weapon. Of course, to the current Qing Su, whether it was a Class 7 or Class 8 weapon, they were all meaningless. Right now, he had specially paid a visit to the primeval sect just to create a powerful banner for Zhiyun so that he could focus even more on the cultivation of the way of the sword, just in case he ended up like Zhou Xian in the future, losing his original concept of the way of the sword when he sensed that there was no path ahead. He had to bend the knee in order to obtain the method to condense a body of battle. Since Tsing Hui wasn't far from the grand beginning sect, and the flying artifact wasn't slow, Tsing Hui had already entered the territory of the grand beginning sect after a brief understanding of Zhi Yun's foundation. When he arrived at the territory of the grand beginning sect, before he could rush to the grand beginning sect's mountain gate, two sword lights broke through the air at an extremely fast speed. The aura of the eternal realm experts on their bodies was unreservedly vast and mighty. Its venerable Xian Sun and venerable dragon. When they saw the two eternal realm experts flying quickly, the disciples who were trembling in fear because of Tsing Hui in the flying artifact and didn't even dare to breathe, loudly became excited at the same time. Venerable Xian Sun and Venerable Dragon are famous figures in our grand beginning sect for many years. When they were young, they roamed the Fortune continent and left behind an illustrious reputation. They must have received our request for help and rushed over to protect us first in order to prevent this so-called Sword Dao cultivator, Tai Ching, from harming us on the way. Great! With two Venerable Xian Sun here, we're safe now. Many disciples of the grand beginning sect on the flying artifact shouted excitedly. Even Nantian Xiang, who was the most talented among them, recovered a little. After his Kuan Peng divine physique was destroyed, he was tactful enough to not provoke Tsing Hui again. However, the feeling of his life and death being controlled by someone else was really uncomfortable. Now that the higher-ups of the grand beginning sect had finally arrived, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The two eternal realm experts landed on the flying artifact at the first moment. When they saw the weak Nantian Xiang and the transcendent elder, their faces were filled with anger. How dare you act so atrociously in our grand beginning sect's territory? This is simply preposterous. Venerable Xian Sun snorted coldly. The venerable dragon's gaze fell on Tsing Hui, who was teaching the two of them as if they were nothing. How dare you provoke our grand beginning sect? You really don't know what's good for you. Today, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your sect's elders. I'll let you understand the consequences of offending our grand beginning sect. The venerable dragon was about to attack when Venerable Xian Sun reached out and stopped him. Venerable dragon, please don't be impatient. This person can rely on his so-called Sword Dao to defeat celestial phenomenon. It's clear that he has some ability. To prevent people from gossiping, we'll let him go to our grand beginning sect's mountain gate. When the time comes, we'll ask the experts of the grand beginning sect to defeat him fair and square. We'll let the world know that the dignity of our grand beginning sect is not to be trifled with. The venerable dragon frowned and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he agreed. All right, as you said, I'll let him live a little longer. When we arrive at the mountain gate of the grand beginning sect, we'll teach him a lesson in front of everyone. We'll let him know the consequences of offending our grand beginning sect. Then, The flying magic artifact flew in the direction of the grand beginning sect. Throughout the entire process, whether it was Taiching, Tsing Hui, or Zhiyun, the two of them didn't even glance in the direction of the venerable dragon. After flying for more than half a day, the mountain gate of the grand beginning sect finally appeared in front of Taiching Tsing Hui's eyes. After all, Taiching Tsing Hui was someone who could kill a transcendent expert with a single sword strike. Although the grand beginning sect was full of confidence in themselves, they wouldn't completely disregard an expert who had the ability to kill a transcendent expert. Therefore, when Tsing Hui's flying magic artifact really arrived at the mountain gate of the grand beginning sect, the grand beginning sect had already sent dozens of true energy, transcendent, and endless experts to be on full alert. The leader was an old acquaintance of Tsing Hui, Venerable Tai Hung. However, because Taiching Tsing Hui was just a clone of Tsing Hui, Venerable Tai Hung didn't immediately recognize him, even though he was somewhat similar to Tsing Hui. Elder, Venerable Tai Hung, you have to avenge us. This kid dares to provoke our grand beginning sect. Venerable, please teach him a lesson and let him understand the consequences of offending our sect. As soon as the flying magic artifact stopped, the grand beginning sect's disciples regained their confidence and quickly ran down. They were no longer as nervous as before. They didn't even dare to speak. Don't worry. Venerable Tai Hung nodded slightly at the disciples and glanced at Nantian Xiang. I heard your divine body was destroyed. Go back and recuperate. Our grand beginning sect will get justice for you. No one has ever dared to humiliate our grand beginning sect like this. Venerable, there's no rush. I like to see what happens to this arrogant person who dares to provoke our grand beginning sect. Venerable Tai Hung didn't mind. Then you can watch from the side. As soon as he finished speaking, his gaze descended onto Qing Su as well. However, before he could speak, Tsing Hui said indifferently, all the experts of the grand beginning sect are here? There should be more than that. Who are you, Venerable One? Aren't you looking down on our grand beginning sect with such arrogance? Venerable Tai Hung stepped forward with a reprimanding expression. Zhiyun, watch carefully. Even though my sword Dao hasn't reached the true peak, it's enough to show you the tip of the iceberg. Remember what I've taught you. I hope you can reach my current level as soon as possible. With that, Tsing Hui didn't waste any more words with Venerable Tai Hung and the others. He suddenly unsheathed his sword, and the dazzling sword light turned into a blazing sun. It immediately lit up the space before the grand beginning sect. You, Venerable Tai Hang's face flashed with anger when he saw Tsing Hui attack. How bold of you to draw your sword in front of our grand beginning sect. Venerables Xian Ri and Along. Capture this arrogant person first. Haha, we should have done this long ago. Venerable Xian Ri and Along laughed loudly. They leapt into the air at the same time and manifested their battle forms. The two ferocious-looking spiritual beasts immediately roared and swept up vast amounts of energy of the world towards the blazing sun in the sky. Waves of attacks swept out as if they wanted to tear the sword light to pieces. Slash! The great purity of Qing Su's style of doing things tended to be direct and direct. When the two never-ending experts, Venerable Xian Sun and Venerable Great Dragon, manifested their battle forms, the sword in his hand moved. The brilliant sword light manifested in the air, creating two blazing shadows that viciously slashed at the two venerables. Even though the true qi and strength contained in the sword light wasn't particularly strong, the sword intent within the sword qi followed the battle forms of the two venerables and directly shone into their souls. Immediately, the two never-ending experts' mental worlds seemed to be pierced through by a blazing sword light. The divine beast souls condensed from a large amount of mental energy were even shredded to pieces by the sword qi that slashed into their mental worlds. With their souls crushed, their manifested battle forms naturally couldn't be maintained. In the eyes of the crowd, the battle forms of the great ceaseless experts were like snow exposed to the blazing sun. The moment they came into contact with the two blazing sword lights, they completely collapsed and retreated on the spot. Venerable Xianri and Along screamed, as their divine beast souls were crushed. Venerable Tai Hung, who had always regarded Xing Hui with great importance, immediately paled when he saw this scene. Not good. This child's battle prowess is at least on par with a Golden Core expert. Attack! Elders, attack with me. As he spoke, his battle form also manifested. Behind him, dozens of true energy, tranquility, and ceaseless experts also manifested their battle forms. For a moment, the shadows of powerful spiritual beasts and divine beasts roared madly, stirring up the wind and clouds. Powerful auras wantonly filled the air, causing the key in front of the primeval sect to become chaotic. With dozens of true energy, tranquility, and ceaseless experts attacking together, even a true Golden Core expert would have to avoid their sharpness. Unfortunately, Xing Hui's strength couldn't be measured by the Golden Core realm, especially when he focused on using his sword intent to kill his enemies. As the blazing sword lights carried an indomitable aura into the dozens of true energy, tranquility, and ceaseless experts of the primeval sect, it was like a falling sun had crashed into the ground. Countless rays of light and heat erupted, instantly illuminating the many spiritual beasts and divine beasts in front of the primeval sect. Swish! The blazing sword intent visible to the naked eye spread out like a shockwave with Xing Hui at the center. The true energy, tranquility, and ceaseless experts' battle forms were like sand sculptures in the face of a wave, collapsing with a single blow. Chapter 637. Sword Dao. Sword Dao. This is the Sword Dao that I've been pursuing all my life. Jiyan looked at her master, who was like a blazing sun in the sky, suppressing Grand Supreme. Her expression was filled with excitement and madness. At this moment, Xing Hui seemed to have turned into a true blazing sun. Whether it was the true energy realm, transcendent realm, endless realm, or even the core formation realm grand elders, anyone who joined the battle was like a moth to a flame. They were unable to cause any ripples and were directly ground to pieces by the blazing sword light. Be it battle constitutions, immortal arts, or all offensive methods and weapons, as long as they approached the range of the sword intent and sword chi formed by the green ruins of grand purity, they would all be shattered into pieces by the sword light that shone like the sun. Powerful sword intent constantly radiated into the surroundings from the Grand Prime's green ruins. It was like a domain that could never be crossed. No matter how many people from the Grand Prime sect came down, they all died. Those who stubbornly tried to continue attacking had their souls directly slain. Sword intent. This was the power of sword intent. Perhaps the sword chi contained in the blazing sword light wasn't very strong, and its offensive power was at most equivalent to an attack from a normal battle constitution. However, the sword intent contained within was so terrifying that it destroyed all who came in contact with it. Even the hostile gazes of some primeval sect disciples that were staring at Xing Hui in the air could trigger a counterattack from the sword intent. The counterattack was through the dazzling sunlight that directly shone on their mental world, making it seem like their mental world was being burned. The pain and damage from this burning far exceeded that of burning flesh. Countless primeval sect disciples howled in pain. How can this be? How can this be? How can this person be so powerful? Nantian Xiang looked at the blazing sun in the sky above the primeval sect's mountain gate, his eyes filled with disbelief. At this moment, the battle constitutions of Venerable Taiheng, Venerable Xian Sun, and Venerable Dragon had already been destroyed by the sword intent. It wasn't just them. The several dozen true energy realm, transcendent realm, and endless realm grand elders who had rushed over had also followed in their footsteps. Powerful battle constitutions would often unleash sword chi the moment they were about to attack. It was clearly an ordinary sword chi, but once it struck the battle constitutions of the primeval sect's true energy realm, transcendent realm, endless realm, and core formation realm grand elders, their battle constitutions would crumble like fragile sand sculptures. The primeval sect disciples all widened their eyes in disbelief. Senior brother Nantian Do is here. It's senior brother Nantian Do. At this moment, the disciples cheered. Nantian Do, the #1 genius of the primeval sect who had clashed with Xing Hui during the Fortune Festival, and a dozen true energy realm, transcendent realm, endless realm, and core formation realm grand elders quickly arrived. Nantian Do's expression immediately changed when he saw the green ruins of the Sky Dao sect that had suppressed the entire sect and even caused the elders of the sect to be heavily injured and even perish. He shouted with a grim voice, "Set up the formation. We'll use the energy of the formation to destroy his lethal move." It's useless. The combat prowess of the person before us isn't strong. His true strength lies in his sword intent. Once we cultivators step into the realm of spirit and chi as one, our true essence and soul energy will form a connection. Thus, as long as we come into contact with his sword intent, he'll immediately follow the soul energy within and slash into our spiritual world, severely injuring our souls. The pale-faced, venerable Taihung smiled wryly. We won't be injured as long as we don't attack. Once we attack and come into contact with his sword intent, we won't be able to escape the fate of heavily injuring our souls. This, Nantian Do's expression changed. His sword intent is too powerful. I can't imagine how a cultivator can be so powerful just by relying on his sword intent. This is unprecedented, Venerable Taihung said with a pale face. To the side, Huang Ying couldn't accept this outcome. She shook her head repeatedly. No, that can't be. He's just a lowly sword cultivator. How can he be a match for the powerful primeval sect? As one of the 6 supreme sects, as long as we're willing to give it our all, even the Lord of Creation of the Central Plains isn't our match. How can we not deal with a mere sword cultivator? Senior brother Nantian Do, you're the most outstanding genius of the primeval sect. You can definitely defeat him, can't you? Can't you? Nantian Do glanced at Huang Ying. He had some impression of this junior sister of his, but he really didn't know how to respond to her. The primeval sect could defeat the Lord of Creation of the Central Plains if they gave it their all. That was just the primeval sect flattering themselves. The closer they got to the Lord of Creation's realm, the more they understood how terrifying a supreme existence who had cultivated a divine ability was. If the Lord of Creation of the Central Plains really wanted to destroy the primeval sect, even the primeval sect and the other supreme sects wouldn't be able to resist. This was also the reason why the primeval sect's members had immediately retracted their little tricks when they learned that the Lord of Creation had returned to the Fortune mainland. Stop. This is an expert we can't fight against. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded from behind the primeval sect. It was filled with helplessness and exhaustion. It's the sect ancestor. The primeval sect's sect ancestor. When they saw the old man coming from behind the primeval sect, a wave of exclamations erupted from the crowd. Sect ancestor, Honorable Taihung, Honorable Xianri, Honorable Great Dragon, and the others came to the sect ancestor's side. Their faces were filled with guilt. This kid has cultivated his sword intent to the pinnacle, coupled with the strength of his divine sense. We can't resist his sword intent at all. Anyone who attacks him will be met with a thunderous counterattack from his sword intent. We can't suppress him. The primeval sect ancestor looked at Xing Hui, who was blocking the entrance of the primeval sect, and a trace of sorrow flashed through his eyes. What was going on with the Fortune mainland recently? First, the Lord of Fortune, Dong Yang, had appeared out of nowhere and suppressed the Fortune mainland with his almighty strength. The 6 supreme sects had no choice but to submit to him and respect him as the Lord of Fortune. Now, the matter of Dong Yang had yet to be resolved, and a peerless sword expert named Tai Ching had appeared. His sword intent was so strong that it was unprecedented. Tai Ching had yet to kill, but if he wanted to kill, he would need to gather his sword intent and slash out with his sword. Who in the primeval sect would be able to stop him? Even those grand elders who had lived for thousands of years and whose spiritual force was not inferior to Golden Core Realm cultivators would be unable to avoid the fate of having their divine sense destroyed. When he thought up to that point, the Grand Prime could only wave his hand. Immediately, all the experts of the Grand Prime who were lunging towards the Grand Prime's green ruins retreated. They were all gloomy and dejected. The reason they were so fearless in killing this peerless expert named Grand Pure One was because they did not want to embarrass the primeval sect. They did not want others to say that the primeval sect did not come out when the enemy came knocking on their door. On the other hand, Grand Pure One did not kill them. As long as they retreated after suffering heavy injuries, Grand Pure One would not pursue them and kill them. This gave them the courage to attack him again and again. But the final result did not change at all. Moths flying into a flame. The experts of the primeval sect were like moths flying into a flame. No matter how many came, they would all die. No one could resist Grand Pure One's brilliant sword intent. As the experts of the primeval sect dispersed, the primeval sect ancestor came before Tsing Hui and bowed slightly. The primeval sect's Xuanji greets the Grand Pure One Sword Master. Grand Pure One Sword Master? Tsing Hui's brilliant sword radiance retracted a little and revealed Grand Pure One Tsing Hui's figure. The Grand Pure One Sword Master's sword intent suppressed the primeval sect. No one in the primeval sect could do anything to him. This sword Dao is unprecedented. No one in the entire Fortune continent can compare to it. He can be called the Supreme Sword Dao. The primeval sect ancestor said sincerely. Sword Master, huh? The primeval sect is not continuing? Grand Pure One said indifferently. Not continuing. Admitting defeat. Xuanji paused for a moment. Even though he was unwilling to face this reality, he had no choice but to lower his head and reply in humiliation. The primeval sect admits defeat. No, this is not real. This is not real. Huang Ying and the others, who had boundless confidence in the primeval sect, felt as if their beliefs had completely collapsed at this moment. They screamed crazily and could not accept this reality at all. The Grand Pure One Tsing Hui swept a glance at Huang Ying and the others. Without needing to say anything, the primeval sect ancestor Xuanji had already turned to Huang Ying and the others and shouted, "How dare you offend the Grand Pure One Sword Master? You really don't know your place. Xuanri, take them away and punish them severely." The Xuanri Sword Master recalled how arrogant and despotic he was when he first met the Grand Pure One Tsing Hui and felt extremely guilty at this moment. However, he had no choice but to obey the orders of the primeval sect ancestor. He could only reply, "Yes." Then, he brought the devastated Huang Ying and the others and left quickly. "Jian, did you see that?" The Grand Pure One Tsing Hui did not bother with the primeval sect ancestor anymore. Instead, he turned to Jian behind him and said, "I saw it. The six supreme sects are only SOSO. It's not that your sword Dao is not strong, but you're too weak. As long as your sword Dao is high enough, the six supreme sects will still submit to your sword." Jian looked at the Xuanri Sword Master, whose brilliant sword intent was above her, and her eyes were filled with fanaticism. "I understand. Since you understand, then let's go." After the Grand Pure Sword Master finished speaking, he did not look at the primeval sect ancestor Xuanji anymore. He took Jian and flew up on his sword. Under the confused gazes of the elders and disciples of the primeval sect, he flew through the air and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He left? Sure, Xuanji watched the Grand Pure One leave on his sword and did not react for a while. What? He left just like that? He thought that the Grand Pure One Tsing Hui would make some outrageous demands after subduing the primeval sect. But now, what's going on? What's the purpose of this sword cultivator called the Grand Pure One attacking the primeval sect? Why did he leave before he achieved his goal? Sure, Xuanji was confused. This, on the other hand, the transcendent elder who followed Nantian Xiang and witnessed the entire development seemed to have understood something. He could not help but reveal a bitter expression. I'm afraid that this peerless swordsman, called the Grand Pure One, did not have any ulterior motives for attacking the primeval sect. His goal might be to test the sword. Test the sword? All the elders looked at the transcendent state elder. Yes, test the sword. The transcendent realm old man laughed bitterly and said, "Our conflict with this peerless swordsman called Tai Ching was mainly because that disciple called Huang Ying repeatedly asked Tai Ching to compete with the sect master of the Boundless Sword Sect, a sword cultivator called Zhou Xian, and demonstrate various sword techniques for her to watch. Because Huang Ying's words were too extreme, it might have caused Tai Ching to be dissatisfied in his heart, so he took it seriously. Thus, what happened next was seen by all the elders. What happened next? The elders were shocked and enraged when they heard this. They naturally saw what happened next. Just as Huang Ying said, Tsing Hui attacked the primeval sect and used the brilliant sword he had comprehended to suppress the primeval sect with his sword. Countless true energy, transcendent, endless, and even core formation elders of the primeval sect could not raise their heads. In the end, they had no choice but to admit defeat and beg for forgiveness from the Grand Pure One Sword Master. An unexpected calamity. An unexpected calamity. This was an unexpected calamity from beginning to end. Damn it, I thought something big had happened to force such a peerless swordsman to attack our primeval sect, but it turns out that we primeval sect disciples brought this upon ourselves. Where is that disciple called Huang Ying? Where did she go? She brought disaster to our sect and brought shame to our primeval sect. She must be punished severely. That's right, a disciple like her who only brings disaster to the sect should be killed. The elders who knew the truth were shocked and enraged. After this battle, their primeval sect had lost all face. Punishment, of course, we must punish her. However, when you return, you should restrain your disciples and juniors. The primeval sect ancestor looked in the direction Tsing Hui had left with an indescribable loneliness in his eyes. The situation on the Fortune mainland is already different. The era that belonged to our six supreme sects has become history, a chapter of over 3,800 words. Over 800 words are given as a gift. Please recommend it. Chapter 638. With Tai Ching Tsing Hui taking care of Zhiyun and solving the problem of the six desires incarnations, Tsing Hui was able to kill two birds with one stone. He returned to the Burning Sky sect that occupied the Purple Cloud Palace in the Central Plains and put his mind and energy into improving the Sword of the Bright Sun. With this kind of improvement, 3 months passed very quickly. In these 3 months, although the undercurrents in the Heaven Wasteland domain could be said to be turbulent, it was still calm on the surface. The heavenly Tao, the divine wilderness, and the eternal continued to slowly encroach on the surrounding forces in preparation for the upcoming general attack. The Sky Vault sect, the Sword Shadow sect, and the Rainbow Sword sect also took advantage of this precious opportunity to quickly pull up the Soaring Cloud Sword sect in the Perching Phoenix mountain range. The Soaring Cloud Sword sect was not weak, and now that they had a saint expert from the Sword Shadow sect to personally oversee it, coupled with the fact that they were not far from the Sky Vault sect and the Rainbow Sword sect, the three forces were immediately connected. This allowed the several saint experts in the area to support each other, greatly increasing their safety. Even the Divine Path sect, which was constantly encroaching on the Rainbow Sword sect, slowly made some concessions under the suppression of this alliance. The overall situation was very good. There were no major changes in the Heaven Wasteland domain, and Tsing Hui was too lazy to pay attention to the trivial matters on the other continents. He just concentrated on the Fortune mainland and completed the first round of cultivation of the Six Desires spiritual cultivation technique. As the Six Desires incarnations were taken back by Tsing Hui from the host and returned to the spiritual world, Tsing Hui immediately operated the Six Desires spiritual cultivation technique and fused the Six Desires spiritual cultivation technique into the spiritual world. Immediately, the Six Desires incarnations experienced love, hate, infatuation, madness, greed, fear, and so on, filled Tsing Hui's spiritual world, causing his spirit to faintly become abnormal and at the same time soar rapidly. It took half a month for Tsing Hui to forcefully suppress the negative effects of the Six Desires soul refinement technique. His expression was rather ugly. This Six Desires spiritual cultivation technique is really evil. If it wasn't for the fact that I didn't use too much energy to cultivate the Six Desires incarnation this time, I'm afraid that the impact of the Six Desires incarnations would cause a split personality. The best outcome would be a huge change in personality. It seems like I can only cultivate it step by step in the future. I can't wait until the Six Desires incarnation is complete before I absorb and refine it. Otherwise, I might not be able to withstand it with my spiritual energy. Tsing Hui's face was slightly pale. Although his spiritual energy level was extremely high, the degree of condensation and utilization was too low. As a result, even though he had powerful spiritual energy, he was almost severely injured by a spiritual energy sane of the same level using a spiritual energy secret technique. Fortunately, although the emotional impact of the Six Desires incarnation and the Six Desires soul refinement technique can cause a split personality and a huge change in personality, as long as I can withstand it, my spiritual energy will be equivalent to undergoing a round of high-intensity tempering and completing a round of sublimation. Although the sublimation effect might not be satisfactory, it's still an improvement. Compared to before, my spiritual energy condensation and utilization rate have increased by at least 10 to 20%. Tsing Hui cultivated for a while, and a smile appeared on his face. After a while, his gaze fell on his character model of the Son of Chaos. In the character model, his spiritual energy level, which was originally at level 132, had increased by 10 levels after a round of cultivation using the Six Desires soul refinement technique, which was level 142. Although this increase could only be considered the weakest compared to the Six Desires soul refinement technique, Tsing Hui was still quite satisfied with such a significant effect after just one round of cultivation. The only regret was the Six Desires soul refinement technique could not be used continuously. He had to completely digest the emotions of others brought about by the Six Desires incarnation and eliminate the hidden dangers before he could proceed to the second round of cultivation. Otherwise, as the Six Desires incarnation's power continued to accumulate, the remaining power of the Six Desires incarnation would erupt once it accumulated to a sufficient level in the second, third, fourth, or fifth round. At that time, his best outcome would be a split personality. He would almost have a mental breakdown from the impact of the Six Desires incarnation's emotions and become a lunatic. Next, I have to continuously temper my spiritual energy and completely eliminate the after effects of the spiritual energy level raised by the Six Desires soul refinement technique. Then, I can consider condensing sword momentum. Tsing Hui had a clear plan in his mind. Level 142 spiritual energy had already reached the void transformation realm. If his comprehension of the laws was high enough, he could even mentally sense the existence of the laws of space. If he was stronger, he could rely more on his spiritual energy. Coupled with a special secret technique, he could tear the void and create an effect similar to crushing a vacuum. This was also the standard of the so-called mythical experts of the Broken Cliff Universe's Shia Empire. The sword momentum that I intend to condense is to gather the power of 10,000 swords and combine them into one. With the power of the King of the Sword Way, I can condense the sword momentum into form. Therefore, if I really want to condense the sword momentum, I have to use an external force as a wedge to stimulate the first sword momentum. As Tsing Hui thought to himself, he realized the wonderful use of his other identity, Sword Master Pak Hui. The next moment, he sensed the location of the Son of Chaos that the elders of the White Rainbow Sword sect had specially located. Then, he directly projected an incarnation over and activated a backtracking technique through his personal space. His original body had already appeared on the welcoming mountain outside the White Rainbow Sword sect from the Fortune mainland, which was tens of millions of miles away from the Heaven Wasteland world. Sing Hui's sudden appearance naturally startled the Golden Core elders and disciples stationed at the mountain peak. However, when they saw who had arrived, they hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Sword Master. No need to be so polite." Sing Hui waved his hand. "Is Sword Master Long Rainbow in the sect?" "Sword Master Long Rainbow is nourishing the Rainbow Divine Sword." Sing Hui nodded. Every time the Rainbow Divine Sword was used, it needed several times more time to nourish it. Otherwise, the sword intent contained within it would dissipate faster and faster. Sing Hui was aware of this. He entered the White Rainbow Sword sect. Along the way, many disciples and elders greeted him, and he directly came to the mountain peak where Sword Master Long Rainbow was. Soon, Sword Master Long Rainbow, who was nourishing the Rainbow Divine Sword, came out of the mountain peak. When he saw Sing Hui, he smiled and said, "Sword Master Pak Hui, are you done with the Sky Dome sect? The matter over there is settled. I came back this time because I have something to trouble Sword Master Long Rainbow with." Speaking of this, Sing Hui paused for a moment before he added, "To be precise, I need to trouble the entire White Rainbow Sword sect." "Oh, the entire White Rainbow Sword sect?" Sword Master Long Rainbow brought Sing Hui to a courtyard on the mountain peak not far from where the Rainbow Divine Sword was kept. He gestured for him to sit down and rest before asking, "Sword Master Pak Hui, what exactly is the matter you are talking about?" "Sword Master Long Rainbow, please sense my sword intent first." After Sing Hui finished speaking, he directly activated a trace of his sword intent. Even though it was only a sliver of sword intent, his mental strength had already reached a startling level of 142. Coupled with the fact that his sword intent was extremely pure compared to regular cultivators, even the sliver of sword intent that had leaked out resonated with the Rainbow Sword Master's sword move. For a moment, a tremendous sword move that continued to permeate the entire courtyard was unleashed, reflecting the sword intent that had leaked out from Ching Su. This sword intent. Sword Master Long Rainbow carefully sensed it for a moment before a trace of shock appeared in his eyes. What a pure sword intent. Furthermore, although Sword Master Pak Hui is only using sword intent, the foundation of your sword intent is extremely solid. The degree of condensation of your sword intent has also far surpassed the level of my sword force when I had yet to condense it. This is truly extraordinary. Rainbow Sword Master should be able to sense that my sword intent is extremely pure. I don't want to destroy this purity, so if I want to condense sword force, I can't choose to fuse my sword intent with the will of the divine beast that I condense and use it to condense sword force. Not using the will of the divine beast to condense it into sword force. Sword Master Long Rainbow was slightly stunned. Then how are you going to condense it into sword force? After all, sword force is different from sword intent. Sword intent only represents one's will, whereas sword force represents the force of the heavens and the earth to a certain extent. Only by combining with the will of a divine beast or divine beast and relying on the natural energy of the divine beast or divine beast would one be able to smoothly transform sword intent into sword force. If one doesn't rely on the will of a divine beast, I plan to combine the will of all living beings and their thoughts with my sword intent to form sword force. Combine the will of all living beings and their thoughts to form sword force. Sword Master Long Rainbow was confused, but he could more or less guess what Sing Hui was thinking. If you do this, it must be very demanding on your own sword intent, right? It is indeed very demanding. Ching Su nodded. The will of all beings and the will of all beings will be a great test of the strength of my sword intent. However, for this step, I've already refined my mental strength to the 142nd layer, so I should be able to bear the will of all beings, albeit barely. Coupled with the fact that my sword intent is much purer than most sword intents, it's compatible with the will of all beings and the will of all beings. The only problem right now is that I can't find enough cultivators who have cultivated sword intent and gather their sword intent to stimulate my sword intent so that my sword intent can undergo a metamorphosis and turn into a sword move. As a result, I want to ask the Rainbow Sword sect for help. I understand. However, I hope that you will consider this carefully. Although there aren't many experts in the White Rainbow Sword sect who have cultivated sword intent, we have a huge foundation here. There are still tens of thousands of people who have condensed sword intent. With the support of tens of thousands of people's sword intent, if you are not careful, forget about successfully transforming and condensing sword force. Your own sword intent will probably collapse under the suppression of tens of thousands of sword intents. I know the consequences of doing this, and I'm already mentally prepared. Xinghui said solemnly. Time was tight. A few years had already passed since the 10-year deadline, so he could not afford to waste any more time. As a result, even though he was not completely confident that he could transform the sword intent into sword force, Qing Su still planned on trying. It was even to the extent that he didn't intend to utilize backtracking during the process of his sword insight's transformation. Otherwise, if he held on to a fluke in his heart, how could he allow his sword insight to be destroyed before being rebuilt and condensed into a sword move? Since you have made up your mind, I will not force you. When you plan to start, Xinghui thought for a while. He still needed 2 months to completely eliminate the hidden danger of the incarnation of 6 desires. He also needed some time to adjust his state and prepare. 3 months. 3 months later, I will condense sword force. Chapter 639. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. At this moment, all the disciples of the Fogbow Sword sect who had cultivated sword intent had been summoned back. They were gathered in the Frost Square in front of the sect. At a glance, there were no less than 30,000 people scattered around. Due to the suppression of the Divine Path sect, the Fogbow Sword sect's influence had shrunk by a large margin. The total number of disciples was less than 300,000, and 60 to 70% of them were outer disciples and odd job disciples. The true inner and core disciples were less than 100,000. It was impossible for all of them to be transferred over to help Xinghui comprehend sword force. Even so, there were still 30,000 of them, which showed the quality of the Fogbow Sword sect's disciples. On the sword comprehension platform at the top of the Frost Square, the Rainbow Sword Master, Bai Heng, Stroking Sound Sword Saint, Ji Xian Sword Saint, Crimson Rock Sword Saint, Flying Fish Sword Saint, and Xinghui all stood on the platform. Xinghui planned to use the Swarm Sword intent to strengthen himself and form sword force. They naturally wanted to see if he could succeed. The remaining disciples are either in seclusion and have no time to divert their attention, or they don't cultivate the way of the sword, so what they condense is not sword intent. Among these disciples, most of them have achieved initial success in sword intent, and there are quite a few elders who have comprehended sword intent to perfection. As for the sword saints of my Rainbow Sword sect, almost all of them are at this level. Take a look. If you want them to come down and assist, then let them go. If you feel that your sword intent is unable to withstand the support of so much sword intent, then I'll let some of the disciples disperse. If you feel that you can't accept the various disciples, I'll let them disperse. The Rainbow Sword Master said with a smile as he looked down at the disciples, deacons, and elders of the Fogbow Sword sect. It's fine. I plan to use the Swarm Sword intent to form sword force, so the more the better. With the sword intent of 30,000 people, even a void interpretation, no, even a virtual shattering expert might not be able to withstand it. Xinghui, do you need to reconsider? Once your sword intent can't support the Swarm Sword intent to form sword force, I'm afraid your mind will collapse. At that time, the best result will be your sword intent dispersing and your soul being heavily injured. Who knows how many years it will take for you to recover? Sword Master Bai Heng frowned and said, the sect master of the White Rainbow Sword sect, the Soothing Sound Sword Saint, also advised, Sword Mistress Pak Hui, your current cultivation and battle prowess are no weaker than a divine. You're at the pinnacle of the world. You can take your cultivation step by step, slowly progressing. Why must you put yourself in danger? Why don't I spend a few hundred years or 1,000 years to properly polish my sword intent and it wouldn't be too late to transform after I've polished my sword intent to an unprecedented level of perfection. At that time, it would be safer and more reliable. 100 years, 1,000 years, Tsing Hui shook his head. He couldn't wait that long. Everyone, I thank you for your kind intentions. But since I've chosen to gather the all-life sword will into my body and use it to transform my sword momentum, I naturally have a certain degree of confidence. If not, I wouldn't joke around with my life and future. When the Rainbow Sword Master and the others saw that Tsing Hui had made up his mind, they did not try to persuade him any further. A sword master would not be swayed by the words of an outsider. After this, I'm afraid you won't be able to hide your identity as the fourth sword master anymore. Tsing Hui smiled. There was an indescribable confidence in his voice. If I can successfully achieve a breakthrough in my sword momentum this time, I don't think I'll have to hide it anymore. The Rainbow Sword Master looked at Tsing Hui strangely. After a while, he said, "All right, I can only wish you success." Beside him, Sword Master Bai Hong also said, "Tsing Hui, this is the first time I've seen a sword momentum like yours that doesn't merge your own sword will with the godly beast will. I'm very curious to see how your cultivation will change after you condense this sword momentum. When the time comes, the two of us can fight again. Of course, when the time comes, I'll have to compete with you, Sword Master Bai Hong." Tsing Hui smiled. "All right, everyone, I'll go down first." After saying that, Tsing Hui focused. The others stopped joking and watched as Tsing Hui landed in the center of the frost square. I really don't know what this Pak Hui is thinking. He doesn't merge his sword will with the godly beast will? Then what about his cultivation? He has already deviated from his original cultivation path. How can he use the godly beast will to comprehend the rules of heaven and earth? How can he step into the insightful emptiness realm and shatter the vacuum realm? This is a short-sighted method that destroys his future. Among the crowd, Sword Saint Chi Peng looked at Tsing Hui disdainfully as he flew into the center of the frost square. The Jishuan Sword Saint glanced at the Crimson Rock Sword Saint and chuckled. Don't forget the Crimson Rock Sword Saint. The White Ruins Sword Saint is an invincible figure who used less than 40 years to cultivate an ultimate ability. His current battle prowess is almost on par with Saints. I believe he knows very well what he's doing. Let's wait and see as much as we can a while, waiting for the White Ruin Sword Saint to complete his transformation from sword intent to sword force. Let's just hope that his sword will won't be able to withstand the sword will of all beings, and his spirit won't collapse. Sword Saint Chi Peng sneered. At this moment, Tsing Hui had already landed in the center of the frost square. Instantly, the 30,000 Rainbow Sword Sect disciples in the frost square focused their attention on him. Let's begin. Tsing Hui stood in the center and said in a deep voice, "All right, be careful." Sword Master Chang Hong nodded solemnly on the sword comprehension platform. Then, his gaze swept across the Rainbow Sword Sect disciples below. Everyone, activate your strongest sword will and help Sword Master Pak Hui condense his sword momentum. Yes, the disciples, deacons, and elders all called out at the same time. In the next moment, the sword intent was activated, and strands of sword intent of various strengths rose up at the same time. They all possessed various beliefs that were slightly different, directly surging towards Qing Su, who stood in the center of the square. As the disciples, deacons, and elders activated their sword will, Tsing Hui's sword will suddenly erupted as well. For a moment, a blazing sun seemed to appear on the horizon above the frost square. It leaped up, radiating endless light and heat. Endless sword will swept through the sky. Not only did it fill the frost square, but it also spread out with the frost square as the center, filling the entire Rainbow Sword Sect. What powerful sword will! Sword Saint Caressing Sound's expression changed drastically when he saw the dazzling sun in the sky. He was not the only one. Sword Saint Ji Xian, Sword Saint Chi Peng, Sword Saint Fei Yu, and the others beside him were all shocked as well. This sword will, if this sword will condense into one and slashes down, we probably won't be able to block it at all. Tsing Hui's sword will is actually so powerful. Sword Master Long Rainbow's eyes widened. His sword will has become even more powerful. Sword Master Bai Heng's words were laced with a hint of amazement. It has become even more powerful. You, Sword Master Long Rainbow's gaze immediately landed on Sword Master Bai Heng. You fought. Sword Master Bai Heng nodded. However, although Tsing Hui's sword will was powerful at that time, it wasn't as powerful as this. Now, I'm afraid that his sword will alone can affect a Saint Stage expert, right? Even if it can only affect a tiny bit, a battle between experts is as fast as lightning. That tiny bit of difference can decide the life and death of two people. With the power of this sword will, unless an ordinary Saint Stage expert has a powerful spirit and a strong will, he'll probably take their lives the moment they're struck by his sword will. If his sword will is already so powerful, then if he condenses sword force, Sword Master Long Rainbow immediately thought of what Tsing Hui had said earlier. If he successfully broke through this time, there would be no need to hide it anymore. Once he possessed such shocking sword intent and underwent a transformation, then unless it was a supreme expert who stood at the peak of the Saint Realm, could anyone resist the might of his sword intent? Even if they were at the peak of the Saint Stage, the outcome of the battle would only be determined after the battle. Sword Master Long Rainbow couldn't help but hold his breath when he realized this. Could it be that our Rainbow Sword sect is about to produce a supreme expert? Rumble, rumble, rumble. While Sword Master Long Rainbow and the others were still in shock, Tsing Hui's brilliant sword light had already merged with the sword will of the 30,000 disciples, deacons, and elders of the Rainbow Sword sect. The brilliant sword will was like an eternally burning sun, illuminating heaven and earth with its endless brilliance. It crashed down mightily, constantly neutralizing the sword will attacks of the 30,000 experts. It seemed that Tsing Hui wanted to suppress all of them with his strength alone. Sword Master Pak Hui's sword will is too strong. Sword Master Flying Fish couldn't help but exclaim when he saw that Tsing Hui was actually suppressing the 30,000 disciples, deacons, and elders who had achieved sword will. Everyone, it seems that the 30,000 disciples, deacons, and elders can't suppress Tsing Hui's sword will to the limit. Let's lend him a hand. Sword Master Bai Heng said. Us? We have 2 sword masters and more than 10 sword masters. How can his sword will withstand us? Sword Master Long Rainbow was shocked. We have to believe that a 40-year-old Almighty can create a miracle. Sword Master Bai Heng was the first to land on the frost square after he finished speaking. His powerful sword force was unleashed. For a moment, it was as if the shadow of a torched dragon had appeared in the void, bringing with it a vast and majestic aura. It pressed down, instantly covering half of Tsing Hui's sword will. Seeing this, Sword Master Long Rainbow pondered for a moment, then said decisively, "Let's go down. However, once you feel that the situation isn't right, withdraw your sword will immediately." Yes, understood. Sword Saint Chaoyin, Sword Saint Ji Xian, and the others replied at the same time. Sword Saint Chi Peng's eyes were glowing as he replied. As Sword Master Long Rainbow, Sword Master Bai Heng, and more than 10 sword masters entered the frost square, the brilliant sword radiance that could suppress the 30,000 disciples, deacons, and elders instantly dimmed a little. Countless powerful sword wills clashed in the void, and Tsing Hui's sword will was constantly being tempered and transformed. Gradually, the core of his sword will changed. It was no longer purely fighting against the sword wills. Instead, it was like a king, a sword sovereign, commanding the many sword wills and using the sword wills of all living beings to strengthen himself, causing his sword will to transform in an unprecedented direction. Tsing Hui, I've finally mastered sword force and reached the omnipotent realm. Wang Ting, sword force. I don't know if I should say something. Chapter 640. My force. As Tsing Hui's sword intent resonated with the sword intents of the disciples, deacons, and elders of the Rainbow Sword sect, he immediately gained a thorough understanding of his own sword force. The force of a sovereign descending. The force of a scorching sun. His sword force was like a sovereign descending upon the world, making all swords submit to him. His sword force was like a scorching sun in the sky, making the stars retreat. This was a kind of brilliant aura. This was a kind of domineering aura. Just as Tsing Hui was quietly comprehending the transformation of his sword intent into sword force, a strand of disharmonious sword intent caught his attention. Tsing Hui turned his head slightly, his gaze landing on the Scarlet Rock Sword Saint. At this moment, the Scarlet Rock Sword Saint was still activating his sword intent, but his sword intent was different from the others. His sword intent looked ordinary on the surface, but it was filled with aggression and invasiveness. It slashed directly into the core of Tsing Hui's sword intent, as if it was attacking him, trying to destroy the stability of his sword force. Scarlet Rock Sword Saint. Tsing Hui's expression turned cold. He knew that the Scarlet Rock Sword Saint had never been convinced that he would become the fourth sword master of the Rainbow Sword Sect. He had tried to obstruct him many times, and had even complained to Sword Master Peng Wang. Unfortunately, Sword Master Peng Wang had learned from Sword Master Chang Hong that Tsing Hui's battle prowess was on par with a divine overlord after only 40 years of cultivation. He had ignored the Scarlet Rock Sword Saint and agreed to Sword Master Chang Hong's suggestion, pushing Tsing Hui to the position of the fourth Sword Master. Who would have thought that the Scarlet Rock Sword Saint would interfere at a crucial moment in his cultivation of sword force? This level of sword intent. Tsing Hui felt the changes in his sword essence and sword force. He immediately tried to use part of his sword force to crush Red Rock Sword Saint. Sword force was different from sword intent. His sword force was formed from the transformation of the sword intent of all living beings. Even though it had not completely transformed, and there were less than 10,000 sword intents that resonated with him, Tsing Hui could use his own sword intent as a guide. Coupled with the suppression of nearly 10,000 sword intents at the same time, the power was so vast that it easily shattered the sword intent that the Red Rock Sword Saint had erupted with. At the same time, the sword force that had yet to take form within the sword force carried with it vast and mighty power, viciously attacking the Red Rock Sword Saint's mind. When the Red Rock Sword Saint saw Tsing Hui, he felt like he was facing a monarch, a god. He could not help but tremble. At the moment when his sword intent was about to be crushed by Tsing Hui's sword force, he actually let out a blood-curdling scream as his entire body went limp. His face was filled with terror. Scarlet Rock Sword Saint. To the side, the Rainbow Sword Master glanced at the screaming Red Rock Sword Saint on the ground and asked curiously. The Red Rock Sword Saint naturally did not dare to say that he had been taught a lesson by Tsing Hui for playing tricks behind his back. He hurriedly climbed his feet and said, "I'm fine. I just tried to condense the sword force not too long ago and failed. Now that I've tried to condense the sword force with Pak Hui, I've used up too much of my sword intent. I'm just exhausted. Sword Master, I need to go back and rest." "Hello, you can go back." The Rainbow Sword Master smiled and said, "It seems like Pak Hui is fully prepared. Condensing the sword force this time was not too dangerous." "Yes," the Red Rock Sword Saint replied. Feeling the gazes of the disciples, deacons, and elders around him, as well as the scene of him making a fool of himself in front of everyone, the Red Rock Sword Saint's heart burned with hatred. However, at this moment, he did not dare to show any of it. He could only suppress the hatred and cursing towards Tsing Hui in his heart, lowering his head and quickly leaving. Only after leaving the Frost Square did the Red Rock Sword Saint dare to raise his head slightly. He stared fixedly at Tsing Hui, who was condensing the sword force in the direction of the Frost Square. "I, Red Rock, will remember today's humiliation. Pak Hui, originally I did not want to accept their invitation and join them, but now you can't blame me. Rainbow Sword Saint, Bai Hung, don't blame me either. Allying with the Sunset Tianxiong Sword Sect and opposing them will not bring any benefits to our Rainbow Sword Sect. No matter how we resist, we will not be able to escape the fate of defeat or even destruction. I'm only doing this to leave a way out for our Rainbow Sword Sect, so that our Rainbow Sword sect won't completely lose its inheritance. Thinking of this, he felt like he had to endure the humiliation for the sake of saving the Rainbow Sword sect in the future. He resolutely split a portion of his consciousness into the Chaos Divine Hall, searching for the members of the Divine Path sect who had contacted him not long ago. On the Frost Square, Tsing Hui's sword intent was constantly transforming into sword force. When he planned on cultivating sword force, although Tsing Hui was not completely confident that he could completely transform his sword intent, he was still 70 to 80% confident. However, when he truly decided to condense sword force, he realized that things are going much smoother than he had imagined. The Rainbow Sword sect can already be considered one of the strongest sword sects in the Divine Wilderness, but the sword intent condensed by these people is still far from being comparable to the sword spirit of the Myriad Swords Mountain in terms of purity. It's not pure enough, so the burden on my sword intent is naturally lower. Correspondingly, the sword force I condense in the end is weaker than I had imagined. Tsing Hui carefully sensed the sword force in his body. Although the sword force he condensed was weaker than he had imagined, it was at most 10 to 20% weaker. Compared to the time when he had sword intent, the sword force's power had not increased by much. Furthermore, due to the fact that the sword intent of the Rainbow Sword sect's disciples, deacons, and elders were not pure, its power should have decreased by 10% or so. However, the advantage was in its range. Before condensing sword force, Tsing Hui's sword intent attack could only be condensed into a single point. The target of the attack was also extremely singular. It was just like when he was trapped in true God suffering's domain. His opponent's domain was constantly surging in all directions, while he could only slash in one direction. Naturally, he was at a disadvantage. But now, as the sword intent transformed into sword force, the sword force was like a domain that enveloped his body. If the endless domain power wanted to threaten his body, it had to first destroy his sword force. However, the sword force's range was wide, so the opponent's domain power would naturally disperse. It cannot be condensed, so the threat was naturally reduced by a lot. It's equivalent to turning a single attack into a group attack under the circumstances of the attack being reduced by 10%. The maximum range is 100 meters, 100 meters. Compared to a Saint Realm giant whose domain power could reach dozens of kilometers, a sword force with a range of only 100 meters was indeed much smaller. Within 100 meters, almost every sword force has 80 to 90% of the power when I erupt sword intent. That is to say, under my sword force, ordinary powerful figures have no power to resist at all. They will be directly crushed by my sword force, and they will die on the spot. Even experts at law phenomenon and earth level will probably lose their ability to resist under the cover of my sword force. Moreover, as my understanding of sword force deepens, one day I'll be able to shrink the range of sword force, which can only be used as a group attack, to 50 meters, 20 meters, or even 10 meters. At that time, its power will be many times stronger than the sword intent now. Tsing Hui was quite satisfied with the change and improvement of his sword force. With sword force by his side, he finally didn't have to face the domain energy of a Saint Realm expert that surged towards him from all directions like before. So long as he activated his sword force, the might of his sword force would naturally cancel out the might of the domain. Even though the power of the sword was not as endless as the power of the domain, Qing Su believed that with his battle prowess, he could definitely defeat or even kill his target before his sword was dispersed by the power of the domain. Activating sword intent for a long time was naturally a heavy burden for many disciples, deacons, and elders. As Tsing Hui's sword intent transformed into sword force, many disciples, deacons, and elders withdrew their sword intents one after another and began to meditate to regulate their breathing and recover their minds that had been exhausted by activating sword intent. Even Rainbow Sword Master, a giant in the Saint Realm, had a trace of exhaustion on his face. However, he immediately went up to Tsing Hui and asked with concern, "Pak Hui, how are you? I've completed the transformation of sword force, and its power has decreased by 10 to 20%. That's good. Rainbow Sword Master let out a sigh of relief. 10 to 20% is a normal reduction. It's just like how a domain realm expert's domain power can't increase his domain power by 5, 6, 7, or even 8 times compared to celestial phenomenon of earth or celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth. A Saint Realm expert will have his domain power reduced by 1 to 2 times based on his accumulation during the celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth. In other words, if his celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth increased his domain power by 5 times, then his domain power will be reduced by at least 2 times. If he forcefully breaks through to the Saint Realm due to his weaker celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth, his domain power will only increase his domain power by 3 times compared to when he was a powerful being. It decreased by that much. Sing Hui was surprised. It looks like it's been reduced a lot, but that's not necessarily the case. Not only does it take time for lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts to enter the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth state, there's also the biggest drawback, which is that it's difficult to move. Some almighty experts who are proficient in speed can even rely on their own speed to suppress lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts. But divine realm experts don't have this problem. Under the coverage of the domain, even the lowest 3 times increase in strength can still easily defeat almighty experts. In addition, the amplification effect of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts is strictly limited to their attack range. But divine realm experts within the domain, it's all amplification. Sing Hui heard this and nodded. When celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth experts entered the celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth state, their attack power and defense power would increase exponentially. However, the celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth that they merged with usually operated slowly, so they couldn't move at high speed. Otherwise, if they left the domain of heaven and earth, the merged celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth would be disrupted and they would have to merge with it again. These celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth experts could only be used as cannon turrets. In a positional battle, they were extremely powerful and could even kill powerful beings who dare to go against them with one blow. However, once they engaged in a battle, they might not be much stronger than powerful beings. This was also the reason why many powerful beings weren't particularly afraid of the celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth. Since you've mastered the sword force, your strength will definitely increase by another level. This time, you can be considered an expert in the Saint Realm, and you don't have to hide anymore. Therefore, we have to celebrate and announce your identity as the 4th Sword Master to the world. Sword Master Long Rainbow said with a smile. Sing Hui pondered for a moment and didn't refuse this time. Now that he was standing at the peak of the divine wilderness, he didn't have to be as cautious as before. Chapter 641. Kongli Continent. Su Fei, the ruler of Heaven's Palace, was quickly walking through a mountain range. Even with the foundation left behind by Tsing Hui, he still couldn't step into the prominent divine stage. However, since most of the experts on Kongli Continent had been killed, he still had the power to dominate Kongli Continent. Not to mention, he still had the top divine weapons left behind by Tsing Hui and Heaven's Palace. As he walked in the mountain range, there were many guards accompanying him. The group of people moved hurriedly and quickly arrived at the location of a dust-repellent stone mine. At this moment, the location of the dust stone mine had been sealed by many experts of Heaven's Palace. If an outsider rashly entered this place, they would be captured immediately. Once their identity was suspected, they would be killed on the spot. When Su Fei arrived, the dark-skinned mine owner immediately led a series of higher-ups to greet him. They trembled as they knelt down and saluted, "Greetings, Palace Master. Is the news you said true?" Su Fei said sternly. "It's absolutely true," the mine owner solemnly vowed. "In these 10 days, we have mined a total of 400 cubic meters of dust stone. Originally, we thought that the production of dust stone in this mine was just a special phenomenon and that it wouldn't be long before the production dropped. But as we dug deeper, not only did the production of dust stone continue to increase, the quality also became higher and higher. Right now, A third of the dust stone that we have excavated have reached the high grade. We have even excavated 3 cubic meters of absolute grade dust stone. 10 days, 400 cubic meters of dust stone, including 3 cubic meters of absolute grade dust stone. This number immediately shocked Su Fei. Has anyone left the mine during this time? Don't worry, sir. No one has left during this time. Good. Su Fei quickly glanced around. The entire mine was surrounded by guards. Every one of them was an elite above the true Qi realm. The entire mine was impregnable. Take me to see it immediately. He waved his hand without hesitation and quickly followed the mine owner into the mine. He didn't even hesitate to personally enter the mine. Not long after entering the mine, there was a burst of exclamations as if someone was cheering below. What's going on? Su Fei shouted. The mine owner hurriedly sent someone to inquire. Not long after, that person came back with the news. With a face full of surprise, he said, "It's the dust-leaving stone, the peerless grade dust-leaving stone." Just now, close to 3 blocks of peerless grade dust-leaving stone were excavated. 3 parties again. Su Fei took a deep breath and led the people around him into the mine at an even faster speed. It didn't take long for them to reach the bottom of the mine. At this moment, there were still dozens of miners working here. When they saw the mine owner and the others arrive, they hurriedly knelt down and saluted. However, Su Fei didn't care about anything else. He glanced around the cave, and without the mine owner's detailed introduction, he could clearly see the dust-repelling stones embedded in the rock in all directions. Quick, quick, Mr. Yufeng, let your team test the specific number of dust-cleansing stones contained in this mineral deposit. Su Fei was so excited that his body was trembling, but he still calmly ordered the group of people he had brought with him. "Palace Lord, please wait for a moment. We will calculate immediately." The man called Yufeng responded respectfully. Then, with an order, the dozen or so people who came with him quickly got to work. While Yufeng and the others were busy, Su Fei summoned a guard and said, "Immediately send a message to Vice Palace Lord Su Ying and ask her to personally lead the Blazing Sun Guards to guard this mine." "Yes, Palace Lord." The guard received the order and quickly left. Su Fei looked at the dust-cleansing stones in all directions in front of him and waited excitedly for the results of Yufeng and the others' calculations. Half a day passed in a flash. Yufeng, who had some results, trembled slightly and quickly came to Su Fei's side. His hands trembled as he said, Palace Master, the amount of dust stone in this dust stone mine, I'm afraid it's much more than we estimated when we came." "Much? How much is it?" "Palace Lord, according to my preliminary estimation, the amount of dust-cleansing stones in this mine is not only high, but the quality is also shocking. According to preliminary estimation, the amount of low-grade dust-cleansing stones is around 200,000 cubic meters. High-grade dust-cleansing stones are no less than 30,000 cubic meters, and supreme-grade dust-cleansing stones should be 4,000 cubic meters. 4,000 supreme-grade dust-cleansing stones. Su Fei's eyes widened to the number. Supreme-grade dust-cleansing stones. Those were supreme-grade dust-cleansing stones. The price of supreme-grade dust-cleansing stones on the market was a shocking 1-to-1 ratio of Taoist rhymes. 4,000 supreme-grade dust-cleansing stones were equivalent to 4,000 Taoist rhymes. Not to mention the 200,000 low-grade dust-cleansing stones and 30,000 high-grade dust-cleansing stones. In other words, the total market value of this mine was probably close to 10,000 Taoist rhymes. The number of 10,000 Taoist rhymes made Su Fei feel suffocated. "Are you serious? This number will only increase, not decrease," Yufeng said confidently. "Great. There will be a reward." Su Fei nodded. In the next moment, he ordered the guards without hesitation, "Immediately seal off this mine. I will personally oversee it. From now on, only people can enter and not leave this mine. Also, immediately send a message to Bai. Tell her to gather enough miners from the other mines and excavate all of these ores as quickly as possible." "Yes." The guard responded and quickly did as he was told. Yufeng, you guys immediately plan and design a plan. We have to mine all these dust-repelling stones as fast as possible. The faster the better. After the matter is done, your team will be heavily rewarded. Whether it's cultivation resources, wealth, status, or heaven and earth spirit objects that can prolong life, my heavens palace will not be stingy. Su Fei seemed to be very courageous at this time. Thank you, sir. We will discuss a plan that will satisfy you. How long will it take to dig out all the dust cleansing stones? If it's just to dig out the main body of the dust cleansing stone mine, 1 or 2 months will be enough. If we want to dig out all the dust cleansing stones inside, based on the mine we have detected so far, it will take at least a year. Then let's dig out the main body of the mine as much as possible. Okay. Su Fei nodded heavily. Such a huge dust cleansing stone mine. After I dig out the main part of the dust cleansing stone, I will report to Master Dongyang. I will definitely be heavily rewarded by Master Dongyang. Thinking about this, he once again gave instructions to Yu Feng and the mine owner, and then hurried out of the mine. Not long after Su Fei left, a member of Yu Feng's team suddenly came forward and said to Yu Feng in a low voice, "Sir, that kid Dan Mu is gone." Missing? Yu Feng's expression changed when he heard this. How could he be missing? That kid said he was going to relieve himself, but he left in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. When we went to look for him, we couldn't see him. Damn it. How is that possible? I personally brought that kid in. There shouldn't be a problem. At this critical moment, Yu Feng was about to say something. But immediately, another person quickly came forward and said with a panicked expression, "Sir, we found Dan Mu. But Dan Mu has been killed." What? Yu Feng's face paled, and in the next moment, he seemed to have thought of something and quickly rushed out. Quickly report this to the palace master. Yes. The team members responded and immediately rushed out of the mine. However, at this moment, a rumble suddenly rang out from above. Afterwards, the ground caved in, and a large number of rocks fell down from above. Before long, the entire cave had completely collapsed, burying Yu Feng's group. What's going on? What's going on? Su Fei, who rushed out of the mine, felt the rumbling sound coming from below, and his expression immediately became very ugly. Palace Master, there might be a collapse below. Beside him, the dark-skinned mine owner had a panicked expression. A collapse at this critical moment. We dug this mine too deep, so naturally we can't guarantee the stability of the structure, so I don't want to hear so many excuses. Immediately dredge the mine and dig out all the dust cleansing stones inside. Tell me when to prepare. Su Fei said with a cold expression. The mine owner immediately summoned people and sent a suicide squad to investigate the extent of the collapse. After a while, he said, "Sir, the structure below has completely collapsed. I'm afraid it'll take a month to dredge up the mine and start digging again." A month? I'll find a way to satisfy you with manpower and material resources. I'll give you 20 days. After 20 days, I want to see an endless stream of dust-cleansing stones being transported out. Yes, Tianwan Continent, Rainbow Sword Sect. Sing Hui carefully sensed the changes in sword intent and sword force. Once the sword force was cultivated, it meant that from now on, he would not have to fear the endless attacks of Saint Realm experts. Although the sword force was slightly weaker than a true domain, it completely made up for the weakness of the ultimate Sword Dao's lack of group attacks. It's about time, Qing Su murmured to himself. Even though I've yet to spar with any other supreme expert, I'm at the same level as Sword Master Bai Heng, at the very least through the transformation of my sword force and my advantage over my domain power. As a matter of fact, if she's not hiding any ultimate moves, I should be able to gain the upper hand slightly. Such strength, not to mention anything else, it would be easy for him to charge into the Black Flame sect and kill his way through. The Hatred Heaven domain has almost recovered after this period of time. Apart from the teleportation skill, True God's suffering won't be able to escape from the enemy. Sing Hui stood up and walked out of the cultivation room. Sword Venerable Hidden Sword had yet to wake up. He could no longer sit by and watch. Even if he might not be able to capture true God suffering alive, he had to make a trip there. Thinking of this, Tsing Hui said goodbye to Sword Master Long Rainbow and left Rainbow Sword Sect. He headed toward the Black Flame Sect. In less than half a day, the mountain gate of the Black Flame Sect appeared in front of Tsing Hui. True God suffering, this time, I'd like to see if the Black Flame Sect can still protect you. Chapter 642. Ching Su shot through the air and entered the Black Flame Sect very soon. After being attacked by Tsing Hui the last time, the Black Flame Church was much more alert than before. However, they were helpless against Tsing Hui's sneak in after hiding his aura. Unless the God Protection Formation was activated at full power, it would not be able to stop Tsing Hui. The Mountain Protection Formation was usually the most powerful formation in a sect. It covered a wide area and was very powerful. The amount of spiritual crystals required to activate it at full power was astronomical. Even a top sect in the Infinite region like the Black Flame Church could not hold on for long. It was unrealistic to keep it activated all the time. Swoosh! Tsing Hui entered the Black Flame Church very quickly. As he used the aura gazing skill to scan the mountain where true God suffering was in seclusion, he was stunned. True God suffering. He's not in seclusion anymore. That's right. It's been so long. The origin energy of his territory that he burned should have recovered by now. Tsing Hui looked around again. Soon, he fixed his gaze on a lofty mountain. Over there, true God suffering's aura was like a pillar of air that shot up into the sky. It was connected with the mountain protection formation of the Black Flame Church. Very good. Ching Su shot through the air and appeared on the mountain where the true God of suffering resided in an instant. At this moment, the true God of suffering was teaching his believers, explaining some sort of doctrine to them with a look of compassion. Below him, there were many law emperors at the true energy boundary, the transformative boundary, the endless boundary, the golden core boundary, and even those at the law emperor level who had cultivated a divine ability. They listened with pious expressions, all of them looking at the true God of suffering with fervent gazes. Looking at the believers who were worshiping him like a god, true God suffering smiled and was about to continue. However, at that moment, he seemed to have sensed something and his heart skipped a beat. In the next moment, a blazing and destructive sword intent erupted from less than 100 meters in front of him. It was like a blazing sun that soared into the sky. The energy that radiated from the blazing sun caused the Saint Stage expert, who had been talking and laughing a second ago, to suddenly widen his eyes. His eyes were filled with uncontrollable rage and hatred. This method, it's that little bastard of yours, as he roared out, true God tribulation charged forward valiantly. He had no intention of backing away at all. His domain power erupted violently, receiving Ching Su's sword of sunlight. The domain power and the scorching sword light immediately clashed head-on. Today you can't escape. True God, suffering roared, and his tone was filled with murderous intent. However, the murderous intent and anger were frozen the moment his territory power collided with Tsing Hui's Sword of the Sun. A vast sword momentum was like a territory that had yet to be formed. It crushed the power of the territory that real God of suffering had unleashed into pieces. Before the power of the territory could do any damage to the Sword of the Sun, it was dispersed and annihilated. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the sword light of the Sword of the Sun was like a meteor that streaked across the sky. It carried an unstoppable force and hit real God of suffering's protective aura. Even though he tried his best to unleash the power of the territory, he couldn't do anything about it. He had no choice but to use the holy statue of Emperor Yin, which had reached rank 15, to block the Sword of the Sun's edge when the power of the Sword of the Sun was unleashed. Sword momentum. He managed to cultivate sword momentum, and the power of this sword momentum can barely fight against the territory power. True God's suffering's expression changed. Just as his expression changed, the swords of the sun rose again and turned into an exploding sun. They swept out boundless brilliance and slashed at true God, suffering again. Slash, slash, slash. Chasing light. The greatest advantage of the supreme superpower chasing light was its speed. The stronger the sword essence, the faster the attack speed. When he had fought with true God suffering, Sing Hui hadn't used the rainbow legendary sword's sword essence to sharpen his sword essence. Secondly, he hadn't cultivated Six Desires' mind training skill to strengthen his godly soul. Thirdly, he hadn't merged Ash's secret skill and Stab's secret skill into one. Although chasing light was powerful, there was a limit to its power. At least true God suffering could barely keep up with Sing Hui's attack speed. However, now 142 levels of spiritual power. The power of the light chasing divine ability had more than doubled now that the sword intent of the Ash and godly stabbing divine abilities had been infused into the two. Almost at the same time, when true God suffering blocked Sing Hui's first sword of the sun with the help of Emperor Yan's holy statue, the second, third, and fourth sword came down like storm. The three sword lights overlapped. In the eyes of some golden elixir realm and almighties, it looked like one sword. However, the power that was unleashed increased exponentially. Rumble. As the energy fluctuation that shook heaven and earth swept out, true God suffering's holy statue of Emperor Yin didn't have time to fight back. The second and third sword broke the holy statue of Emperor Yin into pieces. Then, the fourth sword landed on true God suffering's body. Even though true God suffering had a strong protective shield, he was still sent flying by the power of the sword. He spat out blood, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. You rumble. The battle between Sing Hui and true God suffering broke out. The energy fluctuation that swept out instantly alarmed the other two holy realm giants in Black Flame's sect. Real God One and Real God Savior's power swept out immediately. This sword principle. Thief, it's you. How dare you? Be *starred. You dare to invade Black Flame sect again and again. You really don't take Black Flame sect seriously? Since you're here today, don't think about leaving alive. Purification sect master. Don't bother about the stability of the formation. Use all your strength to activate Great Formation of God Blessing. Activate Great Formation of God Blessing first. The two Holy Realm Giants, Real God One and Real God Savior, roared angrily at the same time. The power of Realm swept out and spread toward Sing Hui. Bind. Sing Hui didn't even look at the two Holy Realm Giants' realm that swept out. He cast Hatred Heaven Realm and turned it into a prison to trap the three real gods. At the same time, he separated the space. Real God Savior and Real God One were separated and trapped in one space, while Real God Suffering and Sing Hui were separated into another space. At the same time, the Scarlet Abyss sword in his hand let out a dazzling light again. The power of the fusion of the scorching sun flowed madly in the Scarlet Abyss sword and swept out under the guidance of his will. It turned into a new sword of the scorching sun and slashed at Real God Suffering. Sun Glory. 10 World Division. Real God Suffering roared angrily, and the aura of divine skill swept out from his body. At the same time, he cast a powerful secret skill. It seemed to split the void in front of him into many spaces and continuously engulf the power of the Sword of Sun Glory. Divine skill? I have it too. Sing Hui's eyes shone, and the aura of divine skill surged out from his body. Even though he was only an almighty, he still felt a vast amount of energy flowing into his body after being raised by two realms. In particular, his compatibility with the power of law had reached a level that he had never reached before. As such, the sword light that he slashed out seemed to have broken through some kind of restriction and directly shattered vacuum. The power of the Sword of Sun Glory continued to spread and slash out. At the sharpest part of the deep red sword, there were pitch-black cracks. Those were the spatial cracks that were formed after the space was torn apart. Qing Su's current strength was obviously not at the level where he could shatter space. Even though he practiced the extreme way of the sword that specialized in attacks and used a level 8 divine technique, it was still insufficient for him to create spatial cracks. However, Qing Su had once added a void fragmentation divine rock into the Scarlet Abyss sword when he forged it. The void-shattering stones granted the Dragon Abyss sword the ability to shatter. When it clashed with other weapons, it could allow the Dragon Abyss sword to rip through the defenses of powerful weapons and armors even more easily, or even destroy the enemy's weapons. Once Qing Su's sword techniques reach a certain level, it could help Qing Su achieve the same ability that was close to shattering space. In front of such a ferocious power that could shatter vacuum, how could real God Suffering's 10 Worlds Division technique withstand it? Almost in an instant, the space that he had separated with the 10 Realms Division technique had been torn into pieces by the power of the vacuum-shattering technique. Then, the second sword of sunlight almost did not stop at all, not giving the suffering true God any time to breathe. Rumble! The blazing, furious power exploded on real God Suffering's body with the force of a thunderbolt. The power of annihilation crushed real God Suffering's protective shield into powder on the spot. The impact that didn't diminish in power tore real God Suffering's body apart and almost tore him into pieces. Your sword principle, how could it be so strong? Real God Suffering roared, and his eyes were filled with terror. At the same time, he was extremely decisive. The power of domain origin that he had recovered not long ago burned again, and a surging domain power swept out from his body. The second before his body was torn to pieces by the explosion of the Sword of Sun Glory, he resisted the destructive power of the Sword of Sun Glory. Is it useful? Xing Hui's light-chasing divine skill was activated to the extreme. At the same time, when the first Sword of Sun Glory was dispersed by real God Suffering's burning power of domain origin, a new sword slashed down again. In an instant, it tore apart the domain power that was formed by burning the power of domain origin. Then, the third sword followed closely. It was as if the two of them were not on the same attack frequency. Every single time the true God of Suffering counterattacked, every single movement would basically be met with 2, 3, or even 4 strikes of the Green Ruin sword at times. At this moment, there was only one thing that Qing Su could do. Slash, 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 slash. Violent, blazing, fierce, domineering. Such an attack was indescribable. Even if the power wasn't satisfactory, such a frequency could still make one collapse quickly. Moreover, the power of the Sword of Sun Glory was definitely not weak. Explode! Xing Hui roared. Real God Only and Real God Savior were trapped in Hatred Heaven domain, so they couldn't rescue them for the time being. His Sword of Sun Glory slashed down madly. Even though Real God Suffering burned the power of domain origin, it was of no use. Then, Xing Hui's second, third, and fourth sword slashed down. The power of domain origin that was formed by burning was torn apart by him fiercely and violently. The blazing torrent that spread out, swept across, and the oppression that it brought made real God Suffering suffocate. How could he be so fast? How could he be so strong? Real God Suffering's eyes no longer had the anger that he had when he saw Xing Hui. Instead, they were filled with endless fear. However, he couldn't stop Xing Hui's attack at all. Stabbing God, along with Xing Hui's new slash, the sword momentum that was contained in the Scarlet Abyss sword blasted into real God Suffering's mind. The moment he suffered a huge mental blow, his mind was turned upside down. Just as his mind was about to collapse, Xing Hui formed a sword with his left hand and tapped the space between real God Suffering's eyebrows. Bang! The vibrating power knocked out the Holy Land giant on the spot. Then, Xing Hui rolled up his personal space. Real God Suffering was captured alive. Chapter 643. This, Suffering True God, was defeated and captured. The one true God and the world Savior true God were stunned when they saw the suffering true God being defeated and captured. They were stunned. True God suffering, a supreme giant of the divine stage, was defeated just like that? Furthermore, he did not even have the chance to escape and was captured alive? Even with the restraints of the Lihan Heaven Realm, a divine sage should not be so weak. The Lihan Heaven Realm was a level 16 treasure. If it was in the hands of the Lihan Holy Man, it would not be difficult to trap a divine sage for a few breaths of time. If the Lihan Holy Man melted the Lihan Heaven Realm into his own territory, he could even trap a divine sage for a long time and make it difficult for him to move. However, due to the fact that Ching Su was not the master of the grief-parting heaven world, coupled with the fact that his cultivation was limited, the sainthood experts like the one true God and the true God of salvation had defeated the grief-parting heaven world in just 3 seconds. Now, they had even taken the time to assist the true God of suffering. Unfortunately, in just 3 breaths of time, the suffering true God was severely injured and captured by Tsing Hui. He kept him in his personal space and sealed the victory of the Black Flame sect. How did the Lihan Holy Man's Lihan Heaven Realm end up in his hands? Is the heavenly axiom going to attack the Black Flame sect? This matter should have nothing to do with the Lihan Holy Man. I heard that the Lihan Holy Man seemed to have lost his Lihan Heaven Realm, and the Lihan Holy Man used a teleportation spell in the battle to kill the Zhujiao Master. He has been lost in the void and has not returned yet. The world Savior true God looked at Tsing Hui, and his expression was solemn. No matter what, we have to save the suffering true God. Otherwise, the foundation of the Black Flame sect will be shaken. The one true God nodded. The great formation of heavenly blessing has been activated. At this time, we can only rely on the power of the great formation of heavenly blessing to turn the situation around. He killed his way to the mountain of the Black Flame sect and captured one of our true gods. Does he think he's a supreme divine expert? As soon as he finished speaking, the one true God and world Savior real God's bodies glowed with radiance. Their territory power spread out continuously and resonated with the God protection formation that enveloped the Black Flame sect. In an instant, their territory power increased by a few times and almost covered the entire Black Flame sect's base. The majestic territory power was like a tsunami that swept out violently and headed straight for where Tsing Hui was. Since the Black Flame sect had been slaughtered by Tsing Hui the last time, the entire Black Flame sect had learned their lesson. Although the divine blessing formation had not been activated all the time, it had been operating at its peak under the condition of saving energy. That was why it could be fully activated in just 3 breaths of time. Its explosive power had shrouded the entire Black Flame sect. Rumor has it that only the ultimate experts can come and go freely in the protective mountain formation of the top sections. Someone like esteemed Zhu Zhao, who stand at the forefront of the ultimate experts, can even break through the mountain gate of a top sect like the Divine Ghost sect by himself. Today, I want to see how much of a difference there is between me and the ultimate experts. Looking at the majestic territory power that spread out above his head, Tsing Hui was filled with fighting spirit. His majestic sword aura soared into the sky and swept out an indomitable sharp radiance. It then crashed into the sea of territory power of the 2 true gods of the Black Flame sect. Then, the sword of the sun exploded in boundless radiance, and flames filled the void completely again. How dare you go against the mountain-protecting formation of the Black Flame sect head-on? You're courting death. Real God Savior roared angrily, and the territory power pressed down. In the territory, a brilliant holy light that carried the power to purify everything shone down. The holy light could disintegrate almost all energy in matter. Even though Tsing Hui had killed the sword of the sun, it was no exception. Under the purifying holy light of real God Savior, the destructive power of the sword of the sun weakened at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. In less than a breath's time, it had dissipated completely. It did not even manage to hit real God Savior's territory and did not have any substantial effect on real God Savior. That's all. When the only real God saw this, a faint smile appeared on his face. However, before his smile could spread, the true God of Salvation's territory once again exploded with a blazing radiance. This radiance directly tore apart the true God of Salvation's world, purifying holy light, divine ability, and blasted onto the true God of Salvation's territory power with a thunderous force. Although it did not tear apart the true God of Salvation's territory power, in the next second, the third sword of the sun followed closely behind and completely exploded within the true God of Salvation's territory power. The mighty, blazing power was like a shocking nuclear bomb that had exploded underground. Real God Savior's territory power first rose high. Then, rings of shock waves spread out from the area that was hit by the sword of the sun. Almost half of the territory power within a radius of a few thousand meters that was hit by the sword of the sun was annihilated. If real God Savior had not drawn out a vast power from the God-protecting formation and poured it into his territory at the crucial moment, his territory power would have been torn apart by the sword light. How can such a terrifying divine ability attack be so fast? This doesn't make sense. Real God Savior felt the tremors in his territory and was shocked. With the support of the God-protecting formation, his territory power had increased by several times. However, it was still almost torn apart by Tsing Hui's swordsmanship. If his territory power had not been supported by the mountain protection formation, then now, thinking of this, real God Savior felt a chill in his heart. He quickly shouted, "Only real God, attack with all your might. Combine our territory power and kill him." The only true God was knowledgeable, so he obviously understood how terrifying Qing Su was. He immediately nodded heavily, and the power of his domain surged out. A swathe of black flames appeared in his domain. The flames were filled with the sense of redemption and transcendence. Combined with the power of the domain of the true God of Salvation, they directly pressed towards Qing Su. For a moment, the territory power was turbulent and mighty. Tsing Hui, who was in the middle of the territory power and supported by his sword essence, was like a mortal facing the wrath of heaven and earth. He looked so small, as if he would be crushed into dust by the thunder power that descended from the void in the next moment. Mountain Protection Formation. This is the power of the Mountain Protection Formation. Tsing Hui glanced at the Mountain Protection Formation of the Black Flame Sect. The God-protecting formation of the Black Flame Sect not only contained a large amount of accumulated mystical energy, but it also used the mystical energy to merge with the mountain range where the Black Flame Sect was located. This caused the vitality of the earth within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers to be covered by the God-protecting formation. On top of that, every divine realm existence had touched the rules of heaven and earth, and could even use the territory power to manifest the rules of heaven and earth. As such, instead of saying that Tsing Hui was fighting against true God Savior and only real God, it was more like he was fighting against heaven and earth within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers. He was fighting against the vitality of the earth within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers, challenging the power of the rules of heaven and earth. Rules? I don't know what the rules of heaven and earth are, but to a cultivator of the ultimate sword principle, there's no need to consider it. Rules of heaven and earth. It's just that my sword isn't strong enough. As long as I continue to burn and activate the sword intent, the so-called heaven and earth, the so-called rules of heaven and earth, will all be turned into dust under my sword. Tsing Hui looked at the territory power that was surging and condensing the energy within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers above his head. It was as if his sword intent was burning in his spiritual world. The boiling sword intent transformed into a sword momentum that soared into the sky. It even transformed into a huge, sharp sword shadow, causing the treasured swords in the hands of all the Black Flame Sect sword wielders within a radius of several hundred kilometers to hum loudly. Under the amplification of this sword momentum, Sing Hui's light, chasing divine ability that was already extremely fast, seemed to have broken a new shackle. In an instant, the speed of 3 slashes increased to 4 slashes. The moment he unsheathed his sword, the 4 sunburst swords seemed to stack into one and exploded in true God Savior's territory at the same time. The first slash shattered true God Savior's world, purifying holy light divine ability. The second slash slashed true God Savior's territory. The third slash tore true God Savior's territory apart. The fourth slash directly slashed true God Savior's true body. The vast and mighty blazing energy pressed down, sweeping up a terrifying, suffocating heat. Under the spread of the heat, even true God Savior, a supreme giant in the divine realm, felt the fear of being annihilated. He can actually tear my territory apart. My territory power has been amplified by the divine blessing great formation. Its power has more than doubled. He can actually tear my territory apart. The true God of salvation's eyes were filled with disbelief. However, the scorching and violent sword chi that was pressing towards him had already frightened him so much that he had no choice but to switch from offense to defense. He activated his defensive armor that was at the 13th level. Rumble. The sunburst swords exploded on true God Savior's defensive armor. For a moment, the air billowed. A terrifying shockwave that was enough to destroy all living things within a radius of several dozen kilometers swept out in all directions crazily. It was then crushed into powder by the territory power that rolled over. Damn it! True God Savior roared furiously. At the same time, he clenched his fist. The seemingly endless energy in the divine blessing great formation was once again mobilized by him and swept toward Xinghui. Meanwhile, True God Savior took advantage of this crucial moment to fly back. True God One, why aren't you stopping him? True God Savior, who was flying back, roared furiously. True God One's expression was piercingly cold. The territory power crazily spread toward Xinghui, and within it, divine powers were surging. Xinghui's eyes flashed. In addition to giving him astonishing attack speed, the light-chasing divine power also gave him unparalleled flying speed. Although he was currently in true God Savior's territory, true God Savior's territory was almost destroyed by him. In the face of true God One's attack, his figure did not change. He merely slashed his sword twice consecutively behind him and destroyed true God One's territory power that was sweeping toward him. Then his figure turned again and pointed at true God Savior. Dazzling sword light bloomed, sunburst, rumble. The territory power that true God Savior had painstakingly swept out from the divine blessing great formation collapsed once again. Damn it! The world Savior, true God, roared angrily. He communicated with the great formation of divine blessing in his spiritual world again. He tried to guide the energy out of the great formation of divine blessing into his territory. However, after he communicated with the great formation of divine blessing, the energy that was guided out of the formation was so weak that it was negligible. He was stunned by what he saw. The energy of the divine blessing great formation gone? In other words, there was an imbalance between the consumption and supply. He had depleted the energy of the divine blessing great formation too quickly. As a result, the divine blessing great formation could no longer mobilize enough energy within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers in such a short period of time to replenish the great formation for him to squander. Chapter 644. This, as real God Savior couldn't get any support, he was dumbfounded. Fortunately, he was a divine stage giant who had gone through hundreds of battles. In a split second, he regained his senses and gave an order. Sound waves spread in all directions and engulfed the entire Black Flame sect. Everyone, enter the divine blessing great array and cooperate with the Black Flame sect's mountain protection great array to kill the invading enemy. When Tsing Hui was fighting with real God suffering, real God savior, and real God only, many of the Black Flame sect's followers, elders, and priests had already soared into the sky and looked at where Tsing Hui was. Real God suffering had been defeated in an instant, and all of them were shocked. However, considering that real God suffering might have been ambushed by the enemy, he couldn't react in time. Hence, they weren't tempted. When they saw a real God Savior and real God only activating the sect's mountain protection formation, they thought they would win. However, real God Savior and real God only couldn't do anything to the enemy with the power of the mountain protection formation. They were shocked. Hearing real God Savior's order, everyone shivered and returned to the formation quickly. They poured their power into the formation. In an instant, the power of the formation that was almost depleted by real God Savior was replenished. God blessing formation. Tsing Hui looked at the continuous formation in front of him and felt the God blessing formation drawing power from 3 to 4,000 kilometers. His eyes were beaming. I don't believe that your mountain protection formation can't be broken. Tsing Hui bellowed, and the scarlet sword in his hand let out an unprecedented radiance. Slash! 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 As his understanding of the Sword of the Sun deepened, in addition to the increase in his spirit level and the transformation of sword intention into sword momentum, the Sword of the Sun that he could perform was no longer limited to the previous 20 or 30 swords. Instead, he could perform dozens of swords, close to 100 swords. At that moment, the sword light formed by the Sword of Sunlight was like the most violent thunder. It crazily bombarded the territory power formed by World Savior True God and only True God. The bright, blazing light kept exploding in the sky above the Black Flame sect. Then, it was suppressed by World Savior True God and only True God. At that moment, the two sides were in a stalemate. This child actually forcefully resisted the power of our Black Flame sect's mountain protection formation. The one true God's eyes widened in shock as he looked at the Sword of Sunlight that was unleashed in a frenzy. Protective Mountain Array. In actual fact, our Black Flame sect's mountain protection formation should have already been destroyed earlier. He is now forcefully resisting the strength of our entire Black Flame sect. The Savior True God continuously mobilized the power of the God Protection Formation to suppress Tsing Hui, but his face gradually turned pale. Omnipotent, a supreme expert. This was the battle prowess of an omnipotent. When did a new supreme expert appear in the Heaven Wasteland world? As for our Black Flame sect, why would we offend an ultimate expert? The Savior True God's voice trembled slightly. The one true God's face was also gloomy. The suffering true God. This ultimate expert is clearly here for the suffering true God. Damn it. It was one thing to activate the mountain protection formation, but it was another thing to have the mountain protection formation activated by all the experts of the sect. Ultimate experts could kill their way into the mountain gates of some of the top sections. Even if the top sects activated the mountain protection formation, they could still successfully kill their way out. The mountain protection formation in this standard usually did not include the mountain protection formation activated by all the experts of the Golden Core realm, almighty beings, and divine great leaders of the sect. For example, the current situation where all the experts of the Golden Core realm and almighty beings of the Black Flame sect had entered the mountain protection formation and activated the mountain protection formation with all their might, but they were still unable to take down their opponent, was something that had only happened to the Chaos Holy Man, the Tai Emperor and Supreme God Huanggu, who had cultivated to the insightful emptiness realm. Even when esteemed Zhu Zhao was at his peak, he could only choose to temporarily avoid the attack or plan slowly when faced with the power of an entire sect. It was similar to Tsing Hui's head-on confrontation, absolutely unique. Just as Tsing Hui slashed out 50 to 60 sunburst swords in the God Blessing formation, the weakest elders of the Golden Core realm in the God Blessing formation finally could not hold on any longer and spat out blood. The power of the God-blessing formation was evenly distributed to the elders and almighty beings who had entered the formation. Instantly, the elders with the weakest cultivation were greatly injured, and their faces turned pale. With the first, there would naturally be a second. Rumble. Following the second round of continuous explosions, more than 10 elders of the Golden Core realm spat out blood at the same time. Their entire bodies went limp, and their faces were extremely pale. They had lost the ability to maintain the operation of the God-blessing formation. Seeing this scene, the world Savior True God and the one true God's faces turned pale. No, we can't let this continue. Otherwise, the elders of the Black Flame sect will definitely be killed by the power that he continuously slashes out. He is burning the origin of the domain. The one true God said. As for the divine skill, when the suffering true God was in danger earlier, they had already used it in order to tear the hatred heaven world apart as soon as possible. We can only burn the origin of the domain. Now, all the elders of the Golden Core realm are already at their limits. If this continues, even if the Black Flame sect manages to defeat him in the end, we will definitely be greatly injured. True God Savior's eyes flashed with a hint of determination. However, just as they were about to burn the origin of the domain, Sing Hui, who had slashed out 50 to 60 sunburst swords in one go, suddenly paused. In the next moment, he turned around and waved his sword. He instantly tore the power of the domain in front of him apart. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he became one with his sword and instantly shot out of the gap of the domain like flowing light. He's running away? The world's Savior True God, who looked determined, was stunned. He can't hold on any longer? Should we go after him? The one true God looked at Sing Hui, who was quickly breaking out of the encirclement, and he was slightly hesitant. Logically speaking, their enemy was already an arrow at the end of its flight. They should quickly go after him. However, when he thought of the destructive scene where Sing Hui had slashed out 50 to 60 sunburst swords in a frenzy, he felt a chill in his heart that went straight to the bottom of his heart. Even with the great divine blessing formation, they could barely hold on to their opponent. Once their opponent rushed out of the Black Flame sect, without the support of the great divine blessing formation, how could the two of them fight against him? We still have to go after him. However, the world's Savior True God and the one true God looked at each other and instantly understood each other's plan. Of course, they had to go after him. Otherwise, the morale of the Black Flame sect would definitely plummet. However, they could not really go after him. It was enough for them to go after him out of the Black Flame sect. Otherwise, what awaited them would definitely be life-threatening. After understanding each other's plan, the two Divine State Giants did not even dare to say anything harsh to Sing Hui. They only shouted at the Church Master of Purification and the other Guardian Kings, "Activate the Great Formation! Activate the Great Formation! Trap him in the Great Formation! Don't let him escape!" The Black Flame sect will not be humiliated like this. The two Divine State experts roared angrily. Their territories swept out as they quickly gave chase. However, how could they be faster than Sing Hui? With a loud boom, the sunburst swords that Sing Hui had slashed out landed heavily on the great divine blessing formation's gigantic light screen. Moreover, he had not slashed out once. He had slashed out 4 times. However, the speed of the slashes was so fast that no one could see them clearly. They only thought that it was just one slash. Out of the 4 sunburst swords, the first slash created an explosive force that caused the dozens of golden elixir experts who were in charge of maintaining the great divine blessing formation to spit out blood at the same time. The second slash caused more than 10 golden elixir experts to explode on the spot. They were turned into a bloody mist by the shockwave from the great divine blessing formation. The third slash caused the 3 Guardian Kings to spit out blood at the same time. They hurriedly disconnected themselves from the great divine blessing formation. As for the fourth slash, it was as if an extremely sharp blade was used to cut through tofu. It easily tore apart the great divine blessing formation's light screen. The dissipating force even bombarded the mountain peaks and courtyards that were enveloped by the great divine blessing formation. The courtyards, lofts, and palaces within a radius of more than 10 kilometers were turned into dust. Thousands of Black Flame sect disciples and deacons died on the spot from the destructive shockwave formed by the slash. After tearing apart the great divine blessing formation of the Black Flame sect, Hui did not continue to cause trouble. He turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He was so fast that even the two divine state giants, True God Savior and the One True God, had to concentrate to see his trajectory clearly. Damn it, True God Savior looked at Hui, who had disappeared into the horizon. It was hard to tell if his expression was one of anger or relief. The last time this person came to our Black Flame sect, although his fighting power was shocking and his cultivation was impressive, but he wasn't that powerful, right? At that time, although he could fight against us for a short period of time, at most, he was only at the second level of the ordinary divine state giants. Let's not talk about being on par with the 10 greatest experts. He was not even on par with the ancient divine beings at the third level. How did his cultivation increase so much in less than a year? The One True God was in disbelief. I can feel it. The last time he came, he used sword consciousness. This time he used sword force. His power has made a huge breakthrough. Moreover, when his sword consciousness transformed into sword force, his power didn't decrease by much. It's simply, when his sword consciousness transformed into sword force, his power didn't decrease. The One True God was shocked. When the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth broke through to the territory realm, the increase in power would decrease from 5 times to 4 times or even 3 times. In other words, it would decrease by at least 20%, 30%, or even 40%. If the territory that was formed by the combination of sword force, rules, and innate godly charm was like this, what more sword force? When did our Black Flame sect offend such a powerful divine state expert? Moreover, when did the infinite wasteland domain give birth to such a terrifying divine state expert? The One True God's eyes were filled with fear. Divine state expert? The world savior True God looked in the direction that Hui had left and said, "Can't you see that this kid is not a divine state expert?" Powerful divine state expert? The One True God instantly understood something and said, "Supreme divine state expert." Supreme divine state expert. The world savior True God nodded heavily and said, "If I'm not wrong, this new divine state expert should be related to the 4th sword master of the Rainbow Sword sect. Perhaps he is the 4th sword master of the Rainbow Sword sect." The Rainbow Sword sect? The One True God felt a chill in his heart and said, "The Rainbow Sword sect has Sword Master Bai Hung, who is known as the most powerful expert of the younger generation. Now, they have cultivated a divine state expert who has mastered supreme divine state expert. This, are they trying to defy the heavens? Inform the Divine Path sect of this news immediately and let them pass on the message to the Heavenly Tao. I don't believe that the Divine Path sect and the Heavenly Tao will be able to sit still when they know that a divine state expert who has mastered supreme divine state expert has appeared in the Rainbow Sword sect." Chapter 645. The defensive formation of a top sect is indeed extraordinary. In the air above a mountain more than 10,000 kilometers away from the Black Flame sect, Hui slowly lowered his flying speed and landed. However, I did not clash head-on with the defensive formation of the Black Flame sect because I could not do anything to the Black Flame sect, but because I wanted to test my limits. If I am not wrong, when I slashed out 50 to 60 sunburst swords, the defensive formation of the Black Flame sect was almost at its limit. If I can slash out another 10 times, half of the Golden Core Elders in the Divine Protection formation will die. If I slash out 20 times, all of the Golden Core Elders will die. If I slash out 30 times, some of the Dharmaraja level experts will die. In other words, if I slash out 100 sunburst swords, Even if the divine protection formation has many golden core elders and dharmarajas in it and is operating at full power, it will still be destroyed by me. Sing Hui landed. He now had an accurate grasp of his own strength. The burden of the sunburst swords on himself and the deep scarlet sword was much lower than before. The deep scarlet sword should be able to withstand 120 sunburst swords, and his body should be able to withstand 80 sunburst swords. In other words, if he used the backtracking technique, it would not be difficult to destroy the defensive formation of the Divine Ghost sect, the Black Flame sect, and the other sections. However, after destroying their defensive formation, he still had to deal with the divine experts of these sections. As the sword will had transformed into sword force, the power of the sunburst swords had weakened. In order to kill a divine expert who could activate the divine technique and burn his domain origin at the brink of death, under normal circumstances, it would probably take more than 10 sunburst swords. If the opponent had a high-grade defensive artifact, it might reach 20 sunburst swords. Whether it was the Black Flame sect or the Divine Ghost sect, they both had 3 divine experts. In this way, if he wanted to destroy a sect with 3 divine experts by himself, he was still slightly lacking. According to this calculation, my battle strength is enough to be ranked among the top 10 experts, and my final ranking should be around the 6th to 8th. Sing Hui carefully estimated and finally had a detailed understanding of his combat strength. It must be known that his battle prowess was still slightly inferior to the 3rd stage of the divine before he had mastered the sword force. Now that he had mastered the sword force, he immediately surpassed the 3rd stage and reached the level of the 10 supreme experts. In fact, he was not even at the bottom of the 10 supreme experts. This kind of improvement was very satisfying for him. As long as the Chaos Holy Man, the Tai Emperor, and the Primordial Chaos Holy Man have not broken through to the vacuum-shattering realm, no one in the Divine Wilderness can pose a fatal threat to me. Sing Hui heaved a sigh of relief. After wasting so much time on the path of cultivation, it was only at this moment that he could say that he truly stood at the peak of the Divine Wilderness world and had the qualifications to control his own fate. However, every sect has a great mountain protection array. This is rather troublesome. If the Heavenly Tao doesn't have a powerful great mountain protection array, Sing Hui's eyes flashed. Black Heaven Taoist Master and Savage Sword, these 2 people belonged to the Heavenly Tao. Sing Hui did not forget the pain that these 2 people had brought to him. Black Heaven Taoist Master, Savage Sword, I'll let the 2 of you live for a while. The cold light in Sing Hui's eyes gradually receded. He believed that esteemed Zhu Zhao, who had obtained the Great Source, would need less time to break through to the profound void realm than he had imagined. When esteemed Zhu Zhao stepped into the profound void realm and even broke through to the vacuum-shattering realm, the structure of the Divine Wilderness world would definitely change. At that time, he would definitely be able to find an opportunity to take revenge. As for before esteemed Zhu Zhao and before the Heavenly Tao and the Heavenly Tao started a full-scale war, he still had one more important thing to do, and that was to collect the space crystal. When esteemed Zhu Zhao broke through to the profound void realm, he would have the means to mobilize the power of space. Once he collected enough space crystal, he would be able to activate the mysterious formation on the Fortune mainland and return to Earth. He would reunite with his family and friends and fulfill the promise he made to senior sister Jiang Ningji. In his mind, this matter was even more important than taking revenge on Black Heaven Taoist Master and Savage Sword. Esteemed Zhu Zhao should still need some time before he breaks through. As for the space crystal, I'm afraid I can only rely on the Chaos Treasure Pavilion. Before the Chaos Treasure Pavilion spreads any information about the space crystal, I'll interrogate the suffering true God. On one hand, I'll get the method to save Hidden Sword Venerable from him. On the other hand, I'll have enough money to buy the space crystal from him. As Sing Hui spoke, he directly threw the suffering true God out. Then, he turned his sword intent into a thorn and stimulated the unconscious, suffering true God to immediately wake up. The moment the suffering true God woke up, His eyes widened as he stared at Xinghui. There was uncontrollable shock in his eyes. You, and hidden sword, what kind of inheritance did you obtain? When he was in the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth realm, he was able to tear apart my domain. And you're actually this strong? Even hidden sword, who is in the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth realm, is inferior to you. Inheritance? Xinghui looked indifferent. Does hidden sword venerable, and I have to obtain the inheritance from the ancient times to be able to reach this level? All right, true god of suffering, now that you've fallen into my hands, your life and death are in my hands, so you'd best cooperate with me obediently. Otherwise, you should understand that countless cultivators in our world have developed various torture methods to force other sons of chaos to hand over their chaos techniques. Do you want to try them one by one? What kind of grudge does Black Flame's sect have with you? How dare you bully Black Flame, sect time and time again? The suffering true god gritted his teeth as he stared at Xinghui. Bully Black Flame's sect? You captured the founder of Hidden Sword Sect, Hidden Sword Venerable, alive, and forced him to hand over everything. As the supreme elder of Hidden Sword Sect, why can't I capture you? After Xinghui finished speaking, he activated the 6th rotation sword aura and injected a streak of sword aura into the suffering true god's body. Seems like you're going to continue being stubborn. I've learned some tricks from Broken Sword Hand. Although they're not elegant, they're quite effective in torturing people. Today, I'll try them on you and see how long you can last. As the sword aura entered the suffering true god's body, it was as if a thin thread had appeared in his body. It moved around his body continuously and pierced his cells, acupoints, and organs. The excruciating pain caused the suffering true god's expression to change slightly. Stop. What do you want? You can't take it anymore. Xinghui smiled faintly. Do you really think that I'm afraid of your torture? However, since you were able to capture me alive, your strength has already gained my acknowledgement. Due to my suffering, even my Black Flame sect is unwilling to continue to be your enemy. Hence, I wish to bury the hatchet with you. I can tell you that when any Saint Realm expert's will, laws, and innate divine aura have fused into one, then the torture of the body would be unable to bring too much pain to the Saint Realm expert. So, the torture of cultivators below the Saint Realm isn't as terrifying and difficult to endure as you imagine. Have you heard of any Saint Realm expert abandoning his dignity and begging for mercy because of the torture and interrogation of his enemies? The suffering true god said forcefully. Xinghui couldn't help but crease his eyebrows. He wasn't sure if the suffering true god was telling the truth. In fact, if I didn't want to bury the hatchet between the Black Flame sect and you, I wouldn't have taken the risk of being captured by you. You should know that every expert of the Divine Realm is at the critical threshold of level 29. At this stage, you only need to take one more step forward to level 30. After level 30, you have the teleportation skill. Even if you trap me with the Hatred Heaven Realm, I could still use the teleportation skill to fight for a chance of survival. Xinghui calmed down a little. The teleportation skill was indeed the best way to save a Divine Realm expert's life. The suffering true god had shown enough sincerity by not using the teleportation skill to escape. He shouldn't force the suffering true god any further. To him, the most important thing was to find out how to save Hidden Sword Venerable. You should know the reason why I captured you alive. Xinghui said, what technique did you leave on Hidden Sword Venerable that made him unconscious? You'd better undo it. Otherwise, don't blame me for being cruel. I've never killed a Divine Realm expert since I started cultivating. I hope that you won't be the first one. Hidden Sword, the true god of suffering, looked at Qing Su. I can awaken Songjian for you, and I hope we can resolve our grudges. I hope you can get along with our Black Flame sect peacefully when the time comes. If I had known you were so capable, my Black Flame sect would never have made you an enemy. Qing Su glanced at the true god of suffering. Considering that Tianqiong's greatest enemy right now was the Heavenly Way, he immediately said slowly, I can guarantee you that. As long as your Black Flame sect can bring out enough treasures to redeem you, I obviously won't cause any more trouble for the Black Flame sect. After all, there's no need for me to become your mortal enemy. Redeem, suffering true God's face grew grave. How much are you going to ask for? As one of the top sects, the Black Flame sect definitely has a lot of Taoist rhymes in reserve. In addition to your wealth, I'm asking for 1,500 Taoist rhymes. Not long ago, the Divine Go sect spent a total of 800 Taoist rhymes to redeem a celestial phenomenon of Earth expert. 1,500 Taoist rhymes. How? How is this possible? The Black Flame sect is different from Heaven Realm. The entire Black Flame sect might not even be able to come up with 1,500 Taoist rhymes. Can you lower your price a little? After all, I've already shown enough sincerity. Lower your price a little? Do you think I'm bargaining with you? You captured the Hidden Sword sect's hidden sword honorable alive and forced him to do so. Don't you think you have to compensate for his loss? Sing Hui squinted his eyes. If you want to lower your price a little, that's fine too. Don't you have a rank 15 defensive treasure, the Fire Emperor's sacred statue? Leave that item behind. I can price it at 800 Taoist rhymes, and the Black Flame sect can pay another 700 Taoist rhymes. Suffering true God's face flashed with bitterness. The Fire Emperor's sacred statue was a rank 15 treasure and his life treasure. How could it only be worth 800 Taoist rhymes? If he were to sell it, there would be people fighting to buy it for 1,000 Taoist rhymes. Now that he was under someone else's roof, he had no choice but to lower his head and agree. 1,500 Taoist rhymes it is. I promise you. Sing Hui moved the unconscious hidden sword honorable out of his personal space. All right, let's do it. Suffering true God looked at Sing Hui and said earnestly, I'll wake hidden sword honorable up because the Black Flame sect doesn't want to be your enemy anymore. At the same time, I hope you can keep your promise. I'll naturally do what I said. Sing Hui said coldly. Suffering true God nodded his head. The scene of Sing Hui barging into the Black Flame sect and capturing him alive had really frightened him. The Black Flame sect wasn't backed by Heaven Realm, Divine Wilderness, or Eternal. They didn't have any backing to ask for help. There was no benefit in being enemies with Sing Hui, who was so powerful that he was comparable to an ultimate expert. Sunday's explosion began. Chapter 646. Hidden Sword Venerable, who had been in a deep sleep for at least a year, moaned softly. He gradually regained consciousness and opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Sing Hui's relieved gaze. Ching! Sing Hui, Hidden Sword Venerable, didn't seem to be fully awake. After a short while, he realized something and his face turned pale. You were captured by the Black Flame sect too? The *eminent, real God in agony, who had just woken up Hidden Sword Venerable, instantly felt awkward. After a short while, he seemed to have thought of something and stared at Sing Hui in shock. Sing Hui? According to the news that we received, Master Zhu Zhao in heaven seems to be taking in a disciple, and the disciple's name is Sing Hui? Are you? Sing Hui glanced at real God in agony and ignored him. Instead, he looked at Hidden Sword Venerable again. Sword Venerable, how do you feel? Do you feel any discomfort? Hidden Sword Venerable looked at real God in agony as he heard real God in agony's voice. Real God in agony, you, Hidden Sword Venerable, please don't misunderstand. Seeing Sword Venerable Hidden Sword's expression, true God suffering hurriedly explained, actually, we've already buried the hatchet with Venerable Qing Su. As a matter of fact, I was invited by Venerable Qing Su to release Sword Venerable as soon as possible. Buried the hatchet? Master? Hidden Sword Venerable was stunned. Then, he realized Sing Hui's other identity and turned to him in shock. You asked Master Zhu Zhao in heaven to help you? Also, when did you become Master Zhu Zhao in heaven? Master Zhu Zhao in heaven is the most important person. Usually, only those who have achieved celestial body and earth can take on the role. You, Sword Venerable, you've been in a coma for more than a year. Many things have happened during this time. I'll tell you everything when the time comes. Are you all right now? Singhui said. Hidden Sword Venerable shook his head and said, other than feeling a little weak, I'm fine. Then, he took another look at real God suffering. By then, he could already tell that real God suffering seemed to be in a worse state than him. His face was pale, and he looked like he had yet to recover from his injuries. This made him suspect whether or not esteemed Zhu Zhao had personally attacked real God suffering. If esteemed Master Zhu Zhao had made a move, he would no longer have to worry about Tsing Hui's safety. Sir Lord, do you think I should send you back to the Hidden Sword sect to recuperate? Or do you want to come back with me for the time being? Sword Venerable Hidden Sword assessed his current condition. Once the soul-binding chains were removed, he would only need a few days to recover. By then, his battle prowess would be equivalent to half a saint, so he would be able to help Qing Su somewhat. As a result, he still said, I'll stay in Heaven's Dome. Sky Vault? All right, let's return to Sky Vault. After saying that, he seemed to think of something and turned to the true God of suffering again. Once your black flame cult hands over the item that carries the way, we can obviously bury the hatchet. However, before that, the black flame cult needs to hand over one person, or don't blame me for paying another visit to the black flame cult. Qixin Dharma King? True God, suffering pondered for a while. Even though he was unwilling to give away a Dharmaraja from his sect, and it would be a huge blow to the Black Flame cult's reputation, he still reluctantly nodded when he thought of Qing Su's terrifying combat strength that was no weaker than an immortal. All right, I'll send Dharmaraja Qixin over when the time comes. He'll be at Venerable Qing Su's disposal. Very well, Singhui responded. However, he did not give real God suffering a chance to recover. He directly kept him in his personal space and flew toward Sky Vault. As Hidden Sword Venerable had not fully recovered, Singhui did not let him rush over to prevent him from tiring himself out. Instead, he separated a part of his personal space and let Hidden Sword Venerable stay there. Without Hidden Sword Venerable, Singhui flew on his sword at extremely fast speed. One day later, Sky Vault's base in Heaven Wasteland World appeared in front of Singhui. Swoosh! Singhui pressed down on his flying sword and let Hidden Sword Venerable out of his personal space. At the same time, he asked someone to arrange for Hidden Sword Venerable to rest. Hidden Sword Venerable looked at Singhui and seemed to have something to say. However, he seemed to have some concerns and did not say anything. He just wanted to recover for the time being. I'll ask someone to come over and let you communicate with Black Flame Sect, Singhui said to Real God Suffering. Real God Suffering nodded. His performance was excellent. After sending someone to report to the Black Flame Church, he seemed to have thought of something and asked suddenly, not long ago, I heard that the Zhuzhao Master was surrounded and injured by the Lihan Holy Man, the Qingwei Holy Man, the Anisrava Holy Man, and the others. I wonder if he is better now? I have some medicine that can treat basic injuries. If Master Tsinghui doesn't mind, I would like to visit Master Zhuzhao. There's no need to visit him. Master Zhuzhao is doing very well now. He is in closed-door training to break through to the insightful emptiness realm. When he comes out again, I'm afraid he will have successfully broken through. Master Zhuzhao is in closed-door training to break through to the insightful emptiness realm. Real God Suffering was slightly stunned. Then, he immediately thought of the news from the Divine Ghost sect and exclaimed, Is it the innate charm of the previous leader of the Divine Ghost sect, Wang Qicheng? After obtaining those innate charms, Master Zhuzhao's domain has reached perfection? Of course. With Master Zhuzhao's background, is it surprising that he has cultivated his domain to perfection after obtaining those innate charms? Real God Suffering forced a smile and said, Of course not, of course not. I'll congratulate Master Zhuzhao first for entering the insightful emptiness realm. With Master Zhuzhao's Abhijna, once he enters the insightful emptiness realm, he will definitely become the most powerful person in Infinite Region. When that time comes, I'm afraid that Tian Dao's Hunda Unholy Man, Eternal's Tai Emperor and Divine Wilderness is supreme, God Ancient Wilderness will all be inferior to Master Zhu. As for the specifics, we will only know after the battle. Xing Hui said. Real God Suffering glanced at Xing Hui, who had the fighting power of an omnipotent expert, and then thought of Master Zhu, who had the potential to enter the insightful emptiness realm. He couldn't help but think of the alliance of Sword Shadow, Rainbow Sword Sect, and Heaven Vault. Unlike the other organizations, the Black Flame Sect did not have an overly shocking background. As a result, even though this sect was rather active, they had always kept a low profile, unlike the Divine Path Sect, Divine Ghost Sect, Grand Wilderness Sect, Illuminating World Sect, and so on. This was also the reason why True God of Suffering immediately changed his attitude when he saw the battle prowess of a sovereign in the Green Ruins. At that moment, after knowing that Xing Hui had such an identity in Heaven Vault and that the omnipotent expert in Heaven Vault was about to enter the insightful emptiness realm, when he thought of the alliance of Sword Shadow, Heaven Vault, and Rainbow Sword Sect, Real God Suffering suddenly had an idea. He asked carefully, Xing Hui, can you introduce me to Master Heaven Vault? I have something to discuss with Master Heaven Vault. You want to see Master Heaven Vault? Yes. True God Suffering looked at Qing Su and said sincerely, my Black Flame Sect isn't far from Heaven's Vault, and we're close to the White Rainbow Sword Sect as well. Moreover, our Black Flame Sect is right beside the Divine Path Sect. Now that Heaven's Vault, the White Rainbow Sword Sect, and Shadow Sword have formed an alliance, I'd like to discuss with Master Heaven's Vault to see if our Black Flame Sect can join the alliance as well. In order to show our sincerity, we're willing to work with the White Rainbow Sword Sect and launch a pincer attack to repel the Divine Path Sect so that we can ensure the safety of the White Rainbow Sword Sect. Black Flame Sect wants to join the alliance of the three sects? Xing Hui looked at Real God Suffering and was about to say something. At that moment, a voice was heard from afar. Ha! Pak Hui, I received news not long ago that someone created a ruckus in Black Flame Sect and even ambushed Real God Suffering and captured him alive. According to the news, his fighting style is very similar to yours. Could it be that you did it? The person who could speak to Xing Hui in such a tone was none other than Master Songjin. After Master Songjin spoke, he rushed over and his face was filled with smiles. However, Real God Suffering saw the smile and he was furious. However, looking at Master Songjin and Xing Hui's casual conversation, his anger quickly turned into a bitter smile. He even lowered his head and didn't dare to look into Master Songjin's eyes. Master Songjin, who appeared, noticed Real God Suffering at the first instant, and he was shocked. Real God Suffering, it's you, Master Songjin. Real God Suffering hesitated for a while, but still cupped his fists at Master Songjin in the end. He was a divine, while Songjin was merely a law phenomenon. Even though he was of a high seniority, he definitely didn't have to act in such a manner. What he did at that moment was like a person who had to lower his head. Real God Suffering. The venerable Master Songjin did not dare to be arrogant, so he returned the greeting. At the same time, he communicated with Qing Su secretly as soon as possible. He was filled with disbelief. Kid by Su, what's going on? True God Suffering was actually captured by you, kid? Divine. That was a saint, after all. Even if he had gone bankrupt in order to repair his domain's origin that he had expended not long ago, and even if he didn't have enough Dao-carrying items to support him to raise his chaos level to the 30th level and teleport away, how difficult would it be to capture a saint alive? How'd you do it? Real God Suffering used up all the item that carries doctrine. He couldn't increase his level of chaos to level 30? Of course. Do you think it's easy to recover his realm origin so quickly after burning it? Without the help of some external forces, how could he have adjusted his domain origin in less than a year? Songjin exulted, being gloated as he said, normally, a divine god won't go out easily after using up all of his carrier items. I guess Suffering True God had the same thought too. He thought that even if he couldn't raise his chaotic level to level 30, as long as he didn't leave the Black Flame Sect, he would be safe with the mountain protection formation. Who would have thought that you would be so good at sneaking in and capturing him alive with a sneak attack? I guess when he was captured by you, he even had the thought of crying. Misfortune came from the sky while he was sitting at home. Seeing we glanced at real God's suffering. He had to admit that this divine was really an old fox. He obviously couldn't increase his level of chaos to level 30 and use the teleportation spell to escape, but he said it so sincerely. He said that he was captured by Tsing Hui on purpose so that he could bury the hatchet, but now, real God Suffering's attitude was good, and he even wanted to persuade the Black Flame sect to join the alliance of Sword Shadow, Rainbow Sword Sect, and Heaven Dome Sect. Even if he knew the truth, he couldn't kill him. However, he didn't plan to give up the 1,500 odal. Even if it wasn't for himself, he had to take back the compensation for Hidden Sword Honorable. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.